while his parents were sitting in the kitchen, eating and watching a small old tube TV. The younger Ivanilov wrote a scary rap in a notebook. Dead dad, dead son, my dead brother. I am dead. My whole family is dead. He was in his room and had already eaten. 3 people barely fit at the kitchen table, so he ate either there or before his parents, as best he could. School had been out for a week. On the last day, while classes were still in session, a quarter of the dwindling class was coughing. Everyone eyed each other suspiciously, and some sat down. From the kitchen came the continuation of yesterday's news. The news that the Voodoo liner, a veritable floating city, was quarantined in the port of Chicago. In one isolated compartment, where the lights are out in the corridors, there were up to a dozen actual zombies, and specialists weren't going there yet because some lab wasn't ready. In other compartments, the sick were kept separate from the healthy. People in spacesuits visited both, taking their temperatures and taking samples. If the sick died, they later revived and attacked others, so they were sent to the zombie compartment. Perhaps scientists will soon find a way to deal with this and return them to normal, the journalist said, shaking her head. Ivanilov Jr. saw all this yesterday too. Nothing changed except the number of people moving into the zombie ward. This ship was sailing along, and among other things, it hosted an epidemiology symposium, and afterward, the people on board started coughing. Coughing and runny noses. At first, they thought it was some kind of flu or something. But when the first patient died and came back to life and bit into the nurse's throat, and she then died and came back to life, it became clear that what horror filmmakers and crazy American survivalists who had spent decades building bunkers and stocking up on canned goods had finally happened. It was impossible to keep the events on board the ship a secret. Passengers were live streaming them. One guy, an English professor, found himself in the zombie section and barricaded himself in his cabin. Once a day, he appeared on YouTube and described what was happening, racking up millions of views. He described how the dead were knocking on his door, how he ate toothpaste, and so on. God knows what else he ate. Viewers assumed he was secretly cannibalistic, as the room was a double. When the Voodoo entered port, it was prevented from mooring, and the National Guard took control of the area to ensure no one would think of firing a grenade launcher at the ship, and to prevent anyone from swimming aboard. Boats carrying scientists and doctors shuttled back and forth. Returning, they expressed concern and anxiety on camera. Somewhere there, behind the armored vehicles, 2 groups of protesters were rushing toward the pier. One consisted of relatives of those stranded on the liner, the other of those who opposed disembarking the passengers and proposed killing and burning them all in the interests of national security. Ivanilov, tired of scribbling paper, went to the window and looked out into the hot summer. It was nearly 40. 2 local drunks were sitting on a bench in the courtyard, one coughing loudly. They would have killed him in the minibus. Well, they would have kicked him out, that's for sure. It has already reached Kiev, but it seems that no one has died from it yet. Chapter 2. Pasha called Ivanilov and immediately said, "Well, it looks like the weather forecast for today will be dry, so are we climbing?" "Yes, I'm already leaving." "Look, you have to go from Troy." Ivanilov got ready. He pulled a backpack from under the bed and started stuffing things into it. Several flashlights, a folding entrenching tool, a chemical protection suit and a garbage bag bulging with air, a knife, a rope with a hook. He went into the kitchen where the TV was humming and started making sandwiches. "Are you still going?" asked the father. "Well, we agreed on this a week ago. Buy some pasta on the way, take the money." "Where am I going with a backpack?" "Where are you going?" Mother turned down the TV. In Kyiv, we want to go to the source. Are you going to stink like shit again? This is an underground river, not a sewer collector. And these, what are they called, inserts? Fecals, not in Kyiv. Before leaving the apartment, Ivanilov pulled a respirator over his face, and the glasses would protect his nearsighted eyes if anyone coughed up germs. The minibus from Troya to Petrovka on the right bank was almost empty. The driver wore a mask and kept an eye on the passengers. Ivanilov wanted to pull off his respirator and cough ostentatiously so the others would disappear, but he restrained himself. They'd still beat him up. A dark-haired guy sat across the row, sweating and wiping himself with a handkerchief. Maybe it was the heat, maybe it was too hot. They crossed the bridge, passing the stop on the island. No one was there. Rumor has it that on the nearly deserted Muromets, near the PDN and Friendship of Nations Park, cyclists have seen living dead wandering around an abandoned recreation camp. There are even photos of them online, but from a distance, and it's unclear whether they're zombies or homeless people. At Petrovka, Ivanilov descended into the cool metro, smelling of rubber and fuel oil. Above, a woman stood at the turnstiles, along with security guards, all wearing masks. There weren't many people around. He descended the steps. The train pulled up, and Ivanilov boarded and settled himself by the door opposite the entrance. There was another guy in the car besides him. He stretched his legs out, almost lying on his seat. Halfway through the ride, Ivanilov considered going over to ask him if he was feeling well, but decided it was unnecessary, and simply watched the twisting power cables whiz past the window in the darkness. The car rumbled like hell. What if they are already in the tunnel? If the power goes out, that's it. The metro will be flooded with the walking dead. The dead underground depths. At the stadium, he stepped into the light, and the light was hot, while the blue sky had dimmed. Along the street, with the cheerful name of Physical Culture, Ivanilov cut through blocks of old and new buildings, made a considerable detour, and opposite Protasov Ravine, he came to a bridge over the Lebed River, which flowed below in a concrete channel, enclosed between the rear buildings of the industrial zone. Ivanilov pulled his respirator down around his neck, vaulted the fence next to a one-story house, jumped off the curb, and headed upstream along the left bank of the river, inside a corridor of high brick walls, either blank or with small windows. Tufts of grass protruded from the concrete slabs on the floor. Digger graffiti began to appear on the right. You can jump over the Lebed River here with a running start, if you try. Soon, a particularly densely covered area of graffiti appeared ahead. This was Pyatnichny Kyiv, a digger hangout. Beyond it, there was a concrete portal, the clear waters of the Kyiv River emerging from underground. Whenever heavy rain broke the surface, the water level in the Kyiv reservoir rose rapidly, sending a powerful wave through it, flooding everything in its path. More than one digger had perished in such a wave. Pasha and some green-haired girl were already hanging around at Friday Kyiv. Pasha, nearly 2 meters tall, had already switched to his chemical locker, and the girl was wearing homeless clothes, which wasn't a big deal, and shoe covers. This is Yana, Pasha introduced her. Hello, the girl smiled. The squirrel from the forum? Ivanilov suggested. No, I'm not from ACES. A person is interested in something separate, Pasha explained. So, shall we go? Ivanilov asked. Are you really like that? I'll change my mind now, of course. A couple of minutes later, all three approached a rectangular dark portal, from where, with a noise, a low but wide waterfall of clove flowed into Lebed. Okay, said Pasha. Let's begin the installation. We'll go to the source and look for a passage into the basements of the Mariinsky Palace. There is no such move, Ivanilov objected. And I say there is. Pasha turned on his headlamp. A hoarse growl came from the darkness. Wow! Yana stepped back. Pasha asked there. Kusanich, is that you? Someone, splashing through the water with their feet, was approaching the exit to the light. Chapter 3. Muromets Island is grassy and flat. The Dnieper River flows on one side and the Chertoraya River on the other. The river is narrower and shallower. There are dirt paths on the island, and it's also cut by canals, dug by who knows when. A small bridge with inscribed railings crosses one. Closer to the bus stop, in the narrow isthmus connecting Muromets with another island, Trukhanov, are the Druzhby Narodov Park, a beach, and various gandaliks. The further upstream, the wilder and more deserted the area becomes, and only cyclists can travel those long distances. Two bikes came together at the bus stop, he and she. He, Igor, was on a cool, full-suspension bike. She, Ira, was on an Ashen bike. Their third ride together. Ira hated her name because she had a bad lisp. What's your name? Eeyore. They could have called you something else, like Dasha. But then she'd have lisped. What's your name? Dafa. Bad luck. Ira was going through a mental breakdown. She'd recently broken up with her boyfriend. To heal her soul, Ira would go to Nyazhaya Gora, a park near a mound of earth, near her home. She lived in the private sector of Kingrusty, opposite Kristerova Gorka, and draw the words, "I let you go," in the dirt with a stick, underlining them. Or she'd sit on the shore of the pond there, throwing pebbles into the water and pouring her feelings into each one. In this way, she'd free herself from the burden. You need to meet new people, Mom advised. Not on social media, but with real people. You're wasting your life sitting in front of a computer at work. You need to expand your social circle. So what should I do? Walk down the street and say hello to everyone? How do you imagine that? Buy a bike and go for rides. Ira bought one and even remembered how to pedal. She'd had a folding aced bike as a child. She connected online with people who went on weekends. They called them mattress rides, or at a mattress pace, because they spent more time relaxing in nature than riding. Ira found it boring, and it took a very long time. Someone's gear was always breaking, or a child would fall off their bike and hurt a knee. The procession would slow down, wait, fix it, treat it, then arrive at their destination, settle down, and eat and drink. Sometimes they'd go for a swim, if there was a place to go. At one of the cycling groups, Ira met Igor, an IT guy in his late 30s who'd spent countless dollars on custom bike parts and various gear. He called himself a cycling knight and rode around on a black, full-suspension bike, all dressed in black. Ira rarely saw his unshaven, big-nosed face, hidden behind large brown glasses framed by a helmet. Today he greeted me and removed his helmet, revealing a balding head. Igor's graying hair was pulled back into a braid. Today I suggest we get to the Lastochka Recreation Center. Oh, so that's where the zombies are? Ira asked. We'll do a stream. There are no zombies there. We'll show it on the stream. At most, we'll see homeless people there. Now you see, almost all the cyclists I've talked to, when you say, I'm going to the PDN, they immediately wave their hands like, oh, come on, there are zombies there. But no one's seen any zombies there, and it's all just a hoax. How is this a fabrication? What about a liner in Chicago, or a ferry across the English Channel? It's in the news every day. Igor waved it off. An epidemic, an unknown disease. They can't explain it. And the living dead? Wait, did they really study them? They locked some unfortunates in cells, they got sick, then supposedly died, and then came back to life and started attacking everyone. It was just a perceptual pattern. Society was already conditioned for this by zombie movies. I don't think... It's better to think. Now we'll go and you'll see for yourself that at least on Moromet's Island, there are no zombies. And they rode down the hill into the park, then along concrete slabs along an alleyway among tall poplars, Ira's bike bouncing slightly and uncomfortably on the joints between the slabs. She held her head up to keep her helmet from shifting, and her neck was already starting to stiffen and her head hurt. The helmet was in the way, occupying half her thoughts. Last time, Ira had arrived without a helmet, so Igor launched into a lecture and a vivid description of how a helmet protects you in the event of a crash over the handlebars, and how those who crash without one suffer in the hospital. All his friends who had ridden carelessly had learned their lesson and now always wear pith helmets, and some even full-face helmets. He explained that a full-face helmet is like a motorcycle helmet, which protects not only the top of the head, but also the chin and face. Now Igor was also blabbering on about bicycles, planning to replace this and install that. Concrete slabs gave way to gravel, then dirt roads. The island was so vast that they rode along without seeing any shores, neither the Dnieper nor the Chertoroy. Amid the steppe, there were groves and humps of grass and bushes. Igor pointed to one such spot with his gloved hand. An archaeologist I know said that there was an ancient Russian settlement here. Every now and then, Ira would slow down and drink from her flask. Igor, as he walked, sucked liquid through a tube from the long camelback slung over his back. Where did these canals come from? Ira asked as they crossed one of them along a dry spot that had clearly been a ford. Again, according to that archaeologist, they were dug in ancient times to cross the island from one river to another. And some may have had a defensive purpose, because, do you see, there's an earthen rampart running along the canal. Yes, exactly. Ira didn't notice until Igor drew her attention. They wound along dirt roads for a while until they entered a bright oak grove. At its end, among the thickets, the remains of more ramparts could be discerned. From there, the thickets merged with steppe, and to the left, behind the bushes and poplars, in a low spot, water could be discerned. We're almost there, Igor said. He took out his smartphone, poked at it with his fingers, and holding it in front of him, began reporting. We're on the shores of Lake Kinishe, on Moromet's Island. On the opposite shore of the lake is an abandoned recreation center called Lastochka. I don't know why it's called that. There are no swallows here. And rumor has it that this very center is now home to terrifying zombies, which are seen here. And who sees them? Cowards and panic mongers, I suppose, because we're about to show you what's really going on here. My companion will help me with that. He pointed his smartphone at Ira. She realized she would now have to proudly lisp, Eeyore. She silently waved her hand at the camera. Ira, Igor introduced her. They began to circle the lake along a path that ran alongside the bushes. Occasionally, they came across clearings, approaches to the water. The lake was long and narrow, reminiscent of a medium-sized field river. Water lilies lay frozen in the dark, yellowish water. Wooden houses began to appear in the distance, on the other side. Near one of the gaps in the thicket, Igor loudly declared, "And here we dismount." He laid the bike on its side. Ira followed suit. They walked to the very edge of the water. It was calm, still, and clear. In the depths, small fish and tadpoles darted among the billowing algae. Bushes obscured the houses, which were about 100 meters away. Peering out from behind the bushes, it was impossible to get a good look at the camp. "Here it is, the Lastochka Recreation Center," Igor said, showing a general shot, then zooming in. Ira cupped her helmet to shield herself from the high sun. She didn't notice any movement among the houses. There were several rows of them, single-story, on stilts, the closest row right next to the lake. Sheds, the remains of greenhouses, and a small water tower, more like a cistern, were also visible. The doors and windows of the houses were black rectangles and, judging by the appearance, had been removed or smashed. Suddenly, a man emerged from one of the houses and slowly walked toward the other. Ira couldn't see the man clearly. "Oh, locals," Igor rejoiced. "So the camp isn't so abandoned after all. We'll finally circle the lake. Don't interrupt our broadcast. Like it, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel." They returned to their bikes. Igor began to attach the smartphone to the handlebars and fidgeted. "Let's go back a little to the grove now, and then we'll move along the other bank. Otherwise, if we go forward, we simply won't be able to get around. There's a road to the Desna River there." Ira took off her helmet and went back down to the water, got down on all fours, and lowered her head into the water. It felt so good. She washed her face. When she rubbed her eyes, she looked at the houses again. Several figures were already walking along the shore in front of them. 4, and a couple more emerged from the house. They walked thoughtfully along the edge, as if wanting to cross but hesitating. "Igor," Ira called. "There's something strange here. Look. Come here." He didn't answer. Chapter 4. From the damp, chemical-smelling darkness of the Klova portal, a man in an expensive suit emerged along a wide stream of water, arms outstretched. "Holy shit!" Yana screamed again. The man took a few steps and plummeted from the cascade straight into Libed. Now his brown back and the spreading flaps of his jacket were visible. He was off. "He was just on TV this morning!" Pasha waved his hand helplessly. Ivanilov jumped into the water, falling below the waist. "Let's get him out!" Ivanilov tried to walk, but it was difficult and slow. The strong current didn't push him, but hindered him. "At the shore," Pasha said, overtaking Ivanilov. Yana ran ahead of the rushing body, jumped down too, and held out her arms. "I'll detain him." "What's wrong?" Pasha stopped. "It's a corpse. What do you need it for?" "That's it. Let's get out of here. We didn't see this. We weren't here." The figure in the suit reached Yana and began to rise from the water with a wheeze. Yana backed up and fell backward. Choking, she darted to the edge of the concrete chute and began to climb onto dry land. Pasha pulled her in. Ivanilov, who had arrived just in time, gave the man in the jacket a strong push and also turned towards the shore. The dead man involuntarily swam again, but struggled. He climbed to the opposite bank. There they stood, separated by a small river that they could leap across if they so desired. Water trickled from the corpse. A mouth twisted on the white face. It seemed the man was grimacing. His fingers clenched and unclenched. A muffled hubbub could be heard, drowning out Clove's din. More men in suits emerged from the portal. The country's leading politicians, members of the government. Some fell into the Libid. Others swerved and walked awkwardly across the concrete. "We have to get going!" Pasha was the first to pull. The boys ran loudly along the brick walls, overtaking the agitated Libed. The heavy-set Pasha lagged behind, but he made an effort to joke. "The dead and politicians have the same outfit." Only when they saw the Libid Bridge, a double one with a main roadway and a separate small walkway, where Ivanilov had recently descended, did they stop to catch their breath. A trolleybus passed overhead. Pasha hunched over, resting his hands above his knees and breathing heavily. "You see?" Yana asked. "What does this mean?" "Yes, chaos has set in," Pasha said. "No. Where is the source of Clove?" "Well, far from here." "Ah, I told you there was a passage to the basements. Those rascals crawled in from there." "More likely from the officers' club or from the arsenal," Ivanilov noted. "What difference does it make?" Yana shrugged. "From there, from the government quarter, at their pace, they've probably been walking since yesterday, in the dark." "Or they were being led, evacuated." Ivanilov took off his backpack, took out a sapper shovel, laid it out. One side a blade, the other with teeth, a saw, and snapped the latch. "Does anyone even know?" Pasha said. "What's going on in Pechersk?" "I think," Yana answered, "something happened there, and that's it. They started evacuating them underground, and they hid it from the people." "It's closer to the helipad on the descent." "So it wasn't possible to go there. It didn't work out." "It's recorded in the morning then," Pasha realized to himself. "So what do we do now?" Ivanilov pressed his glasses to the bridge of his nose, straining to peer around the bend in the river, trapped in a concrete trench. And behind him, over the bridge railing, hung a dead man in a bright t-shirt and a Panama hat. The Panama hat had fallen off. He mumbled something in a slurred voice, and it turned out that otherwise there was silence. The cars weren't moving. From afar, only the shrill screams of men and women could be heard. The lonely screech of brakes, followed by the metallic clang of a blow and a bang. "That's it. There's no connection." Pasha lowered the phone. Two concrete gutters, a wide one and a smaller, enclosed one, cut into the industrial zone. The Libed River flows through the small one, while the outer one serves to hold back floodwaters. In summer, you can walk along its banks all the way to the mouth, where the Libed River flows into the Dnieper. The dead man in the tennis shirt recoiled from the railing and quickly dragged himself to the left. Meanwhile, on the opposite bank, a clearly alive man dressed in a gas station attendant's overalls ran down a mound of earth between the willows and jumped off the wall into the river's outer trough. Unfortunately, his foot twisted on the slippery spot from the spring. The gas station attendant fell sideways, pulled his leg up, closed his eyes, and screamed. The zombie on the bridge leaned against the railing again, sniffed the air, and rolled over. He was wearing shorts. His body landed flat on the concrete with a thud. The corpse lifted his bruised but only pink face and crawled toward the gas station. "Ah," Ivanilov muttered vaguely. He climbed into Libed to reach the wounded man. "Fuck," he managed to say, and almost immediately fell down. "Dude!" Pasha held out his hand. Ivanilov surfaced with a curse, saving his glasses. He dropped the shovel and kicked his feet underwater, trying to feel for it. Because despite the shallow depth, the bottom was invisible. The dead man reached the gas station and, gritting his teeth, crawled onto it. "Dude, hold your hand!" Pasha shook it, calling out to Ivanilov, who watched in fascination as the living man's face turned into a piece of meat, the zombie repeatedly lowering its head and rapidly chewing. Ivanilov, his shoe covers churning in the water, lunged forward, braced himself with his hands, climbed onto the concrete, jumped up, and kicked the dead man in the temple. And again, he hit something. The zombie had turned on him, Ivanilov could tell by the eyes, because the zombie was looking straight at him, and his eyes weren't like those of a normal person, but slightly golden, as if coated in an oily film. Behind Ivanilov, Pasha and Yana rushed into lie bed, and he kept staring at the corpse's smiling face. It grinned slowly and carnivorously, like a child seeing a delicious cake. A thought struck him. A simple one. The gas station attendant whined and pressed his palms to his gnawed face. Chapter 5. No one answered Ira. She turned and stumbled into the water. Her foot immediately sank ankle-deep into the mud. The gap between the bushes was empty, even though just a minute ago Igor had been fiddling around there with his fancy bike. Ira quickly climbed out of the lake's hollow and up into the steppe, where her iron horse was lying on its side. He wasn't the only one lying there. Ira helped Igor up. He was running around in circles. "They stole it! Give me your bike, I'll go catch up!" He tore off his helmet, fell to his knees, clutched his head, and staggered. He stared at his hands to see if there was blood. He jumped up, looking at himself was terrifying. "You bastard! I'll bury you!" Then he turned to Ira. "Didn't you see where he went?" "No, I was by the water." "No, I was by the water," he mimicked. "Appreciate the humor of the situation," Ira suggested timidly. "In the middle of nowhere, on a deserted island, your bike was stolen." "There's nothing funny about this," Igor shook his fists in rage. He threw his helmet on the grass and briskly ran to Ira's bike. She rushed over. "I won't give it! Go to hell!" Igor raced down the path at a speed Ira hadn't expected from her Ashino bike. She followed him for a while, but fell hopelessly behind and stopped, breathing heavily. Her heart pounded to the rhythm of techno. She had nothing with her except an empty backpack and a smartphone. It's unclear why she took the backpack with her on the trip. Her water bottle was left on her bike, and she was thirsty. It was hot, after all. Ira pulled her phone out of her pocket. No signal. So, where to go? When they were driving here together, Ira simply watched Igor's rear wheel and turned where he turned. That's all. She could have figured out the route with a map, but it wouldn't load. How else would they navigate? By the sun? Well, it was high in the cloudless sky. Moss on the trees. It must be growing in the north. Ira glanced at the slender silver poplar that stood near the lake, separated from it by bushes. No moss. Yet, if she knew which way was north, she would surely have reached the North Pole. The worst idea that could ever come to mind, Ira said to herself, having thought it over. The decision is very sensible. Why? If you don't know where to go, you should ask. There's a whole village over there, a holiday camp, full of people. They'll show you the way and warmly offer you some juice. "Do you have anything to drink?" Ira will ask. "I'll buy it from you." And they'll open their refrigerators, revealing fizzy drinks and colorful juices. And a venerable old man will solemnly bring out a thermos, unscrew the lid, pour it in, and present it. Spring water. Oh, and cold. He clicks his tongue. A hot haze swirled over the steppe. Ira reached the grove and turned right, into a thicket with earthen mounds skirting the lake at one end. They had to climb through a windfall. They came across fallen fence wire, its rusty mesh overgrown with hops. "Waltz, the last waltz," Ira sang the Agatha Christie song pitifully. "Auf Wiedersehen, mein lieben Frau." She couldn't remember anything else from the text, so she repeated it again and continued silently. There must be a road where the camp is, a well-trodden path. After all, people had stopped there with food and belongings back when the recreation center was probably owned by some factory and thriving. A light flickered behind the trees, meaning there was a field there. Ira lost her desire to go there. She needed to do what they did in the movies, go to the very edge of the thicket, part the branches with her hands, and peer out. Was there anything dangerous? Instead, she turned sharply right, toward the water. It became clear that the lake had once continued here, and at this point it had been filled in, blocked by an earthen dam. Not far from the shore, a fallen tree lay in the water, its trunk dry and sun-bleached. It seemed to have dangled its branches, looking like a strange, enormous insect, a prehistoric praying mantis. Between the shore and the lake, a kind of watery patch had formed, a confined area. The water there was dark and calm, and a head moved within it. Not on its own, but attached to the body. But only the head peeped out, swollen, with matted hair and a hurt mouth, the lips so bulging. It was silent and barely disturbed the surface of the water with any movement. A wedge snapped in Ira's soul, point upward. Something twisted. And then she began to think calmly. She realized she had time to escape. She crouched down, pulling her smartphone out of her pocket. She held it in front of her and began recording. "Peace be with you," she said. The head stopped and turned in her direction. Chapter 6. Ivanilov thought he'd fallen asleep, and now he realized it. There are things like lucid dreaming, dream hacking, and the like. He'd never really delved into it. In a stupor. With coordinated skill, Yana and Pasha, their hazmat suits glistening with water, grabbed the struggling zombie by the arm and leg and dragged him into the river. The Liebed River splashed over him and began to drag him along in its strong current. The corpse stretched out, half hidden by the water, and lay still. "Call your wife," the gas station attendant suddenly said clearly. "Call an ambulance and call your wife." He still didn't take his palms away from his face. "The connection isn't working," Pasha answered. "What are we going to do?" Ivanilov asked. He needed clarification. Then everything would become clear and he would do it. "Call your wife," the wounded man repeated. A pool of blood had already formed around his head, and caught in the joint between the concrete slabs, a running thread was forging its way forward. "I'm telling you, there's no connection." "He can't hear," Yana reassured him. It hurts so much." The words sounded slurred through the palms. "Should we try lifting him and carrying him?" Ivanilov came up behind him and grabbed the gas station attendant under the arms. He took his hands away from his face and groped around. Yana turned away. Pasha cursed. The river murmured softly. "I need to pick up Vadik from school. Do you hear me?" Ivanilov did not look down. "Huh?" the gas station attendant asked again. He slumped limply, the chemical smell of Liebed joined by the pungent odor of urine. Pasha said to Ivanilov, "That's it. Let him go. He's dead. That's it." He pressed his hands to his temples and began to swear again. "Will it be constructive?" Yana asked. "According to the laws of the genre, this one will now begin to come to life and attack us," Ivanilov said. "Screw it all," Pasha got mad. "I'm not going to chop off anyone's head or anything like that now. Let's just move away. We're in plain sight here. Let's go stand under the bridge." And so they did. They glanced back. No, the gas station attendant hadn't moved. Yana suggested, "The short plan is to find a place where the signal still works and try to contact your parents, or perhaps even your friends. Get online and find out which areas are still safe. Ideally, security forces should block off the areas affected by this case." "That's the idea," Ivanilov noted. "What are you talking about? Look," Pasha gestured broadly. "That's it. What security forces? Planes aren't flying, helicopters aren't flying. They should have been flying first, coordinating the ground operation. What security forces? You saw where the government was. It's gone viral, Yana said cheerfully. Ivanilov collected his thoughts. This riverbed is our safe route through the city. Along its long stretch, when it leaves the industrial zone, there will be a metal mesh fence along it. It was installed by the railway workers. It will also give us access to several train stations. Any suggestions? Look, Pasha rubbed the bridge of his nose. There's going to be a portal to the light sand cave here now. Collector of Protasov Yar? Yeah. We'll install ourselves there and wait it out. You said it yourself, that's it. There's nothing left. We're relying only on ourselves. Well, there's another option. We have a sewage collector running parallel to it, an underground one. No, I don't support it, said Yana. Me too, Ivanilov agreed. Well, listen to the end, Pasha continued. Near the mouth of the Libid, on this shithole, there's a sewage pumping station. And from there, a tunnel under the Dnieper goes to the left bank at Osokorki. Now do you see any sense in what I'm saying? Swimming in the shit under the Dnieper? Yana squinted. There's a service corridor running along there. What if this mess only affected the right bank, and the left is clear? Have you considered it? Let's do it this way, said Ivanilov. While we can, we'll walk along the Libed riverbed, and if it becomes unbearable, we'll go down into the sewer through one of the observation chambers. An arched brick passage, Pasha began to describe, through which rushes a murky stream of sewage and every possible ailment on the planet. This will be an unforgettable adventure. How romantic. But you're in hazmat suits, Yana reminded him. And some of them are already torn. Pasha lifted his bent leg. There was a hole in the knee of his puffy silver suit, and pink hairy skin showed through it. Ivanilov swore. But I'm ready, said Pasha. I'll be much calmer there, in the shit, than here, up there. The plan couldn't be worse, but we couldn't come up with a better one. Just first, one of us, Ivanilov poked himself in the chest, goes up to the bridge and quickly surveys the area. Maybe it won't be so bad. If there are zombies, we just do as we've decided and move downstream. I'm going up, Ivanilov said, climbing up the rocks jutting out from the retaining wall to a height almost as tall as himself. Pulling himself up by tree trunks, he made his way along the path, slippery after the previous evening's rain. Willows and bushes hid him from prying eyes, and a concrete fence shielded his view to the right. Here, at the exit to the highway, was a homeless shelter. A chair, some unidentifiable trash, a disassembled vacuum cleaner, and a torn cotton blanket. Off to the side, the blue building of the Kiev Tovarny station was visible, and not far in front of it, a pot-bellied vintage car, green and resembling a May beetle, sat proudly on a pedestal. A double pipeline hung heavy over the road. I wish I could get there and travel a few kilometers unseen, although who knows what they're pumping through it. Ivanilov cautiously walked out onto the street, toward the lamppost. It was unusually empty. Further away from the old car, he noticed a car with its doors open, slanted across the road. Almost opposite the bridge, slightly to the left, at the intersection with Yamskaya Street, an old three-story apartment building with rear entrances was visible. A wild thought crossed his mind. Run there and ask to be let into someone's apartment. In that direction, on both sides of the street, after the house, already beyond another intersection, the building of the Electric Welding Institute stretched to the visible end. Ivanilov turned around. Hey! What's there? Yana asked from below. Let's get here quickly. There's a residential building there. Let's ask to go inside. It's not a given they'll let you in, Pasha responded. Whatever, I have to try, while there's no one around. Half a minute later, Pasha and Yana were already next to Ivanilov. The trio crossed the road, past the recycling center shed, and began to turn the corner of the house. The street was quiet, green, graced by whitewashed maples and poplars. Houses just as unassuming as the first one were nestled behind the front gardens and in the surrounding area. A wheeled trash container with a hinged lid sat by the curb. Someone had written "Punkmobile" on the side. They turned across cracked asphalt into a courtyard, half occupied by a garden and lawn. Both front doors were wide open. Dark blood was seeping down the chipped steps of the first. "Okay, let's get out of here," Ivanilov said, turning sharply in the opposite direction. Behind a two-story yellow house directly across the street, behind a couple of trees, the dark rectangle of the stream's portal from Protasov Yar could be seen. The Lebed River itself, which preceded the portal, was invisible from here. And from the bridge, stumbling and twisting their legs unnaturally, a crowd of dead people in suits almost ran. "Statesmen! Why did they come here?" Yana shouted. "Over here," Pasha pointed to the trash container. "Hide here and I'll cover you with the lid." "And you?" "After." Yana and Ivanilov climbed into the Punkmobile and crouched down, while Pasha slammed the top down, slammed his fist on the metal, and, without thinking, ran into the yard. He had a choice: hide behind the car on the lawn or dash for the second entrance. Pasha chose the latter. Chapter 7. High in the heat-dim blue sky, a passenger jet, beautifully painted like a candy wrapper, was landing at Giuliani. It didn't matter that the pale faces of zombies pressed against the windows and that the surviving crew members had locked themselves in the cockpit. Oh, and there was also Stewardess Dasha, locked in the restroom. And from the other side, there was pounding, and the sound was enough to drive you crazy. At the same time as the wall clock ticked against the brain of Pasha, holed up in someone else's apartment. But down below, no one knew anything about this. And Kanarin waits near the stop for his trolley bus. Waits under the mushrooms, near the entrance to the botanical garden, which is on Zverinets, the farthest botanical garden, not in the center. There are ticket booths shaped like mushrooms with enormous caps. There are 2 of these booths, and circular benches are located around their legs in the shade. To avoid standing in the blazing sun at the turnaround, Kanarin settled under a mushroom. As soon as the trolley bus on the other side pulled in, he'd descend the steps and board. Watching the plane leave, Kanarin imagined the surrounding area visible from up there. The city lay in the palm of his hand. The Lebed Valley, Bald Mountain to the left, Zverinets and Busova Mountain to the right. What vastness! It was called, I think, one of Repin's last paintings. What vastness! Kanarin combined 2 professions, artist and actor. Kanarin found his niche in pharmaceutical commercials. At 50, he impersonated a sick, decrepit old man who suffered from alternating constipation, hemorrhoids, and generally groaned violently. Then, after taking a miracle pill or potion, he would suddenly recover and cheerfully recommend others take the same. Sometimes he used his talent to get free rides on minibuses. Hunched over at the entrance, almost turning his face sallow with an effort of will, he would ask, "Is there still a preferential place for the second group?" Try to refuse if it seems like the person is going to his own funeral. There were already quite a few people gathered at the bus stop. It was Saturday, and the botanical garden was packed. They needed to stand close by, otherwise there wouldn't be enough space. Kanarin was heading downtown to the recording studio to lend his voice to yet another weakling. By this time, the trolley bus had already pulled up. Kanarin, lost in his gaze at the plane, had forgotten everything. He ran down the steps leading from the mushrooms and the platform at the entrance to the botanical garden, mincing along, and rushed to the open doors. Inside, he scurried around for a seat. There was an empty seat in the back, next to a young woman dressed in a long dress and with a headscarf tied around her head. A parishioner, Kanarin realized. They were being led into the botanical garden, on whose grounds the Iona monastery is located, for free. He quickly plopped down next to him and glared up at the gaping man who was also aiming for his spot. Kanarin barely restrained himself from sticking his tongue out at him. Oh God, what does that smell like? Then he realized. It dawned on him. The woman sitting next to him was smelling of incense. Of course, she was obviously standing at work. What else could she smell like? Kanarin shook his head, looking for another empty seat. There wasn't one. The trolley bus hummed its electric motor and pulled away. Well, now the whole journey will feel like a funeral service. Kanarin, with many deceased relatives behind him, winced. But there was something warm and pine-like about the incense. Perhaps, deep down, he liked the scent. Outside the window, the brick Khrushchev-era buildings jutting out of the ravine, beyond the trees, raced back. Bastianaya Street ran in a straight line along the edge of this ravine, flanked on the other side by first the botanical garden fence, then a tall white building, then a Khrushchev-era building, then a converted movie theater with an extension behind it, and finally, a vocational school. And then, near the vocational school, some devil of a driver swerved the wheel and the trolley bus veered into oncoming traffic, blocking the street. The poles, one after another, came loose from their wires. Half the passengers, including the gaping one, fell, and some were thrown out of their seats, including Kanarin, who was in the side seat. And the one smelling of incense, sitting by the window, didn't give a damn. I was unlucky enough to go on a hack job today. A nasty voice inside Kanarin noticed. Honor the Sabbath, don't work. He stood in the middle of the salon. Driver, what happened? Loud as a fire chief. Some people started banging their fists on the opposite side of the trolley bus. On the wall, on the windows. What the hell? Kanarin said indignantly. The driver started honking frantically. One passenger shouted, Open the doors! And everyone started making noise. Driver, let us get out! The doors hissed open, but the first ones to descend the steps. At this point, Kanarin lost track of what was happening, but he acted as instructed. He snatched the sharp-nailed hammer hanging next to the window. He pounded it furiously on the glass, right next to the woman who smelled of incense. She pressed her hands to her temples and kept chanting on one note. Ah, ah. Then Kanarin grabbed some ring at the top of the window, pulled the rubber along the rim, forced out that damn thick, unyielding glass, and smashed it with his hands and feet. There was a crush at the doors. Someone was trying to force their way in. There was a piercing scream, and the driver continued to honk the horn. Perhaps because his head was on the steering wheel and his eyebrow was pressing the button. Let's get out here, Kanarin suggested to everyone and no one, and was about to climb out, but instead he shook the incense-wearing woman hard by the shoulder. Hey, hey, hurry there! Clutching a fabric bag in her hand, a thin, wrinkled wrist with blue veins, she awkwardly, her skirt getting in the way, swung one leg over the side, then the other, and jumped. Kanarin followed her, immediately looking around. Down the street, at an intersection near a school, two cars collided head-on, immediately followed by a third. A fire erupted and black smoke billowed. The mangled door of one car opened, and a man crawled out and dragged himself several meters. The fire died down. People ran down the street, some running alongside buildings, some simply across the roadway. "What's missing?" Canarin wondered, and a strange answer came. Music. In movies, there's always some kind of disturbing music playing at this point. Because it's a movie. From under the trolley bus, on this side, two hands emerged. Fingers curled, fingers clenched and unclenched. Like in the Soviet Sherlock Holmes, Professor Moriarty was warming up before a fight. Canarin tugged his unwitting companion by the elbow up the street, toward a Khrushchev-era building with a store on the ground floor. It was the famous Khrushchev-era building known throughout the neighborhood, the so-called Arsenal building, for it had been built for the arsenal workers. And now, next to it, stood a barrel of kvass. A saleswoman sat calmly on a stool next to the barrel, and next to her, two men holding mugs of foamy kvass, already half drunk. One said to the other, "Holy shit." Chapter 8. The front hallway was dark and cool. The walls were painted. The lower half was blue, the upper half white. Pasha ran up the 5 steps to the landing and began ringing every doorbell in a row. He stopped, listened. Dead silence. Call? He walked up to the second floor and pressed his ear to the nearest door. Suddenly, it gave way and opened slightly. Pasha entered a stranger's apartment. It smelled like the medication of a chronic patient, like a table with various pills and bottles that has stood there for decades, emitting pungent odors mixed with the echo of Napoleon cake and the image of rotary telephones. "Is anyone here?" The wall clock ticked loudly. Pasha couldn't see it, but it fell on his brain like hard drops. Tick, tick, tick. The electricity meter, the calendar with saints, the sideboard, the small icons. The kitchen. Empty. The main walk-through room was empty too. Only the furniture seemed to still retain their warmth. The television stood turned off. The door to the second room was open. Pasha waited, then cautiously peered in. Wardrobes, a made bed. Pasha returned to the kitchen, rummaged through the shelves, pulling them out, and found a long knife. He went to the window. The view was of the yellow house across the street and a dumpster with the sign Punkmobile. And then a crowd of zombies, government members, filled the street like a cackling river, like a carnival procession. One corpse began pushing the Punkmobile, and another, then a third, joined in. The rubber wheels quietly shook and rumbled on the asphalt. Pasha sat down. When all the noise died down, he stood up. There was no one there. The street was empty again. "No, I'm not a coward," said Pasha. He went out into the hallway, carefully locked the door, then sat down in the room in front of the TV. He noticed the remote controls on the table nearby. He turned on the TV with one. The message, "No signal," began to jump across the screen. Pasha sat there for maybe 15 minutes, maybe less, maybe more. He didn't count. The jumping message effectively erased his thoughts. There were no thoughts. He blinked occasionally, the corners of his mouth drooping. Sighing, he stood up and left the house. He didn't ring any other doorbells. Holding the knife, he slowly wandered down the street, trying to notice every movement around him. But there was no movement. Only the rustling of his hazmat suit and the hood pulling down over his eyes. Pasha pulled back the hood. better that way. To the right, by the playground in front of a one-story house, stood an empty gray trash container. Not the right one. An alley led deeper, toward Libid, turning in front of another turquoise one-story building. To the left, a chain-link parking lot fence stretched, topped with barbed wire. Lots of cars. Along the fence, a man and a woman, their fingers stuck in the holes, shifted from foot to foot, their mouths and chins bloodied. And their necks. And the fronts of their clothes were covered in blood. Grinning, they wheezed. "Do you want this?" Pasha showed them the knife. He quickened his pace. The dead remained. Beyond, the street was empty, squeezed between squat industrial buildings, very modest, and the same fence, but now beyond it were garages or something like that. A multitude of footprints led from a large puddle. Residential buildings appeared again, and at the first one, with a satellite dish on the corner, across from a vacant lot, the punkmobile stood alone. Its lid was closed. Pasha ran up and unscrewed it on its levers. Inside, there is only trash at the bottom. Chapter 9. "He's flying somehow strangely," Boris said, watching the plane humming in the sky above Bald Mountain. The four guests from the pass stood on a hot overpass, on a bridge, beneath which a railroad ran through vacant lots, and some ruined houses were visible. Ahead, half the world was taken up by the green, tree-covered hill of Bald Mountain, with striped radio towers protruding from the foliage, one tall, the others smaller. These people looked strange, dressed in black t-shirts with cartoon corpses and bandanas emblazoned with skulls and spiders. Only aging rockers, forced year after year to maintain an image that no longer fits, dress like that these days. But none of them were in a band anymore, and with rare exceptions, they listened to a completely different kind of music. But Borya arrived from Kharkov, and it was his birthday, so they decided to reminisce, put on their shabby clothes that had been lying in their closets for 2 decades, and go drinking at Liska, the same old group, Kira, Borka, Zheka, and Lyoka. They were all hiding something from the scorching sun. Zhenya, his bald head, under a bandana. Lyoka, his beer belly, under a leather jacket. As he was leaving the house, his wife asked him not to wear a leather jacket in this heat, but he proudly replied, "Where are my 16 years?" And it was a trick question, because they had been married 16 years ago. Kira had changed the least, though no one recognized her at all, because her hair, which used to be long and brown, was now short and black, and she had lenses in her eyes that changed the color of her irises to red and made her pupils narrow, like a cat's. Because of this, and her black lipstick, she was sometimes mistaken for a vampire. There was no shade on the overpass. The asphalt invited you to fry pancakes on it. The occasional car whizzed past. "Yes, it's going strangely," Lyoka agreed about the plane. "It's going sideways. It should be going straight ahead." There's a long-range localizer for Zhuliany Airport at Demyevka, and it should be heading first for that, and then for the localizer at Zhuliany itself. It's deviating from its course. "Anyway, forget it," Zheka advised. "Something really strange is happening in the city today." "I had a hard time getting to you," Kira said. "Pechersk is closed off in the area of the government quarter. There are traffic jams everywhere." "What?" "I don't know. They're probably protesting something. There's nothing about it in the feed. I barely looked online today. I didn't have time." "They don't know that the biggest rebels are here," Borya smiled. And he changed the subject. "I don't recognize anything here. I don't even know where we're going. And this overpass was built relatively recently. answered Lyoka. I wouldn't say it's particularly needed here, this exit from Kyiv. There aren't many cars here. There aren't many now, but I remember there weren't many either. Well, that's not my thing. Damn, it's hot here. Lyoka wiped the sweat from his temple. Who the hell thought of fencing off the railroad down there? We could have walked under the bridge, in the cool air, along the tracks. And this, Kira recalled. When someone died on the tracks behind Ocean Plaza, you know, there was a bridge over the pipe, across the lee bed. A bridge and then the rails. Well, I cut the corner onto Demyevka when I was trading at the Izium market. And what now? And they cut off his railings, cut off the bridge, and then they started putting up this fence along the entire railway. Oh, Zheka said regretfully. And now we need to go around the overpass. Crap. What about the rock shop? Is it still going strong? Asked Bordia. They demolished it a couple of years ago. Now it's a housing office. Bordia cursed. Then he said, Money triumphs over good. I was thinking of suggesting we go there and ask them to play us some different tapes to try. On a stereo. Nowhere, except maybe in a time machine. Zheka pulled his bandana off his head and ran his hand over his bald head. No, why not? Kira objected. The rock shop moved from the basement to Petrovka Street. They sell backpacks and t-shirts there. Where do you think I bought this t-shirt a month ago, especially for my birthday? Kira was wearing a t-shirt with a portrait of Cobain. Is Moon on the second floor? Bordia continued to absorb the present. And he's been gone for a long time. The rock shop lasted longer, right up until the house was torn down. It's a pity. That was such a house. We need to go there now, Lyoka pointed across the wide multi-lane road. They needed to climb over the fence. Did they forget to include a traffic light or a zebra crossing? Kira shook her head. No. Pedestrians are not included in the project. 2 by 2, the former rockers stepped over the fence and ran across the road in the wrong place, and then another one. At the foot of Bald Mountain, a ravine overgrown with weeds darkened, the dried-up bed of the Libed River, which had been drained into an underground collector. By the way, right there, Lyoka nodded his chin in the direction of the tower. But down below, during the time of the Lysogorsk fort, there was an execution site, 5 gallows, and the relatives had to pay for the executions. The cynicism of the Tsarist regime, Kira noted. Where were they buried? Asked Bordia. First here, nearby, then in another cemetery. But this is where the explosion of gunpowder depots happened in 1918, which is described in Bulgakov's White Guard. No, then over the hill, at the Zverinets, in the Botanical Garden. Were there warehouses there? The Zverinetsky fort converted into warehouses. That's when it went off. Remember the Rose Garden in the Botanical Garden? Well, there's a rose garden, then a patch of pine trees, and nearby, there used to be a fort. Remember that mountain, closer to the exit? You once knocked a bench off it when you were drunk. Well, it was poured over part of the bastion. Ah, that's why the street is called Bastionaya. Yes, here we are. Near a vast wasteland with power lines, a road led upwards into the Liska thicket. First, let's say hello to Libed. Lyoka waved his hand to the left. They walked around the low, rust-striped fence and headed along the dirt road past the vacant lot. To the right, the undergrowth raged. Punks aren't afraid of dirt, Kira said. We stopped at the edge of a long lowland that bisected the area. Ahead, a river emerged from underground, emerging from a large concrete portal, accessible by car. Further on, the Libed River flowed along its natural channel, shallow but quite wide. Every bush in its ravine and the branches hanging over it looked festive and funereal from the hanging scraps of cellophane and bags. "What is this?" asked Bordia. "When the water rises," Lyoka explained, "all the trash gets caught on the branches." Risking a fall, the group descended the path to the portal from a steep, burr-covered cliff. Minnows frolicked in the yellowish, strong water. Two concrete roads, one on each side of the stream, leaned into the darkness. Damp sacks lay along them. Bordia picked up a water-worn piece of brick and tossed it into the water. The current carried away the ripples. "Hello, Liebed." "Do you hear that?" Kira said. "The power lines are humming. It's the music of electricity." We climbed back up to the road. Then Bordia got a call on his cell phone. "My wife," he said, and turned away, shielding himself from the wind. "Yes, hello again. What's going on in Kyiv?" "Nothing's going on. We're having a good time." Standing at the foot of Bald Mountain, right next to the execution site. "What?" "The signal's bad." "I didn't check. I didn't have time." "Well, the whole block's cordoned off. You never know." They've cordoned themselves off with a wall of indifference. "The connection's dropping. I can't hear anything. I can't hear anything. I'll call you back later." Pressed reset. The narrow road began its ascent up the slope of Liska. Mighty trees obscured the sky with their green foliage. The same plane circled the mountain, but Borja didn't notice. He was trudging up the mountain with everyone else. The conversation somehow veered towards spirituality and linguistics. "Well, I'll prove it to you now," said Lyoka, "that the church has a direct influence on everything we write." "Well, prove it," Kira agreed. Accusative case. How do you pronounce the endings? This to the question, who, what? What, what? There. And what about in Church Slavonic? Let's say, of the Holy Spirit. See? A go. That's where the G comes from. Or we write ego and say evo. More likely, Borja chimed in, we're talking about the old spelling, which was adopted into our modern language from Old Church Slavonic, the successor of which was the church script. But yes, we still write differently than we pronounce. "But in Ukrainian it remains," said Lyoka, chogo, kogo, but with a softened G. This soft G was used even in northern Russia quite recently. Peter the Great wrote as he spoke, Viborg, Peterburg. So what conclusion can we come to? "Do you really have to deal with this crap in the heat?" asked Jekka. "You're backward. You look to the future but forget the past." "And the future grows from the past," Kira said, raising a finger. Another bend in the road brought them closer to the intersection. The concrete fence of a radio transmitting center with its towers opposite the ruins of a checkpoint. A filthy, graffiti-covered brick house surrounded by bushes, low apple trees, and construction debris. Soot from a previous fire curled up the walls from the empty windows. "What kind of tower is that?" Bordia asked. "I've seen it so many times before and never cared." "Was it a former jammer?" "It's unclear," Lyoka replied. "I think it's used by mobile operators. But no one noticed anyone there. It works automatically." "They say there's all sorts of paranormal activity going on here," Kira said. Lyoka chimed in. "Various anomaly and torsion researchers claim this is Object 112, aka Radio Object Number 7, and that some kind of miracles with electromagnetic radiation and time are happening there. You see, when there's a fenced-off facility and no one's allowed in, and let me remind you, this used to be a military unit, and this filthy KPP belongs to it. Any lack of information breeds fiction. People love to fill the void. This is a function not only of physiology, but also of the mind." A distorted, indistinct voice was heard. It was getting closer. A group of people were walking in a single file along the concrete, barbed wire-topped fence of the broadcast center. Leading them, glancing around, was a plump, rosy-cheeked man in shorts, a red t-shirt, and holding a megaphone. "Let's hide in the hut." Bordia quickly disappeared into the house, the others following him without a word. The voice became clearer. "The mysterious tower remains a mystery. Now, take a look at the ruins. Rumor has it that monstrous rituals are performed here on Sabbath nights, as Bald Mountain attracts not only neo-pagans, but also black magicians." 4 people emerged from the house, raising their hands. Liaka lowered his eyebrows somewhere toward his cheeks and jutted out his jaw. Kira pretended to bite Jekka's throat. Bordia ominously clarified the matter. "We are necromancers." "From a closed lab," Kira added, breaking away from her voice. "There it is, behind us. There's actually a bunker there. We just revived several dead people. Have you heard of the Lazarus Project?" The man with the megaphone looked at them, then turned to the tourists, then raised the megaphone to his lips and laughed. "Go away, Satan!" He turned to the people who had come with him, but for some reason they began to stare silently over his shoulder. A loud roar grew louder. Chapter 10. Mila and Dima walked to Liska from the other side, away from the rails, from the Dnieper, where a pedestrian path leads up into the ravine. Downstream, to the left of this road, there was a small lake, reputed to be Rusalocha Lake, in fact, a former settling pond for the Lisogorsk fort. To the right, a path ran steeply through grass and bushes up a towering, truly bald, loamy cliff. From there, from above, everything was visible. The industrial zone facing the Dnieper, the bluish-green distances, and the succession of hills beyond Liska. Mila and Dima were KPA members, final-year students, and they'd first gotten into Liska with the esoteric club run by a guy named Parmaliuk. Tall, hippie-ish, and long-haired, he'd take off his shoes on these outings and encourage others to do the same. "You have to feel the ground," he said. "We all stand on the ground. But how can you stand on something you don't feel, something you don't know?" Everyone nodded, grasping the wisdom, and took off their shoes. Then Lialia Belanoshko, red-haired and delighted, asked to show off. "Mikhail Grigorievich, what do the words of Hermes Trismegistus mean, as above, so below?" "I don't agree," answered Parmaliuk. "I don't agree at all." He bizarrely combined the teachings of Gurdjieff and Castaneda and brought students to Bald Mountain in search of places of power, where they sat in a circle and meditated, assuming the strangest positions. Dima and Mila actually met at Parmaliuk's, not at the institute, and somehow became fast friends. Then Dima had some troubles with the guru. One day, Dima jokingly said, or rather, quoted, and not even to Mikhail Grigorievich, but he heard, "I am Linus Torvalds, and I am your god." Parmaliuk remarked with a stern face, "But you shouldn't do it like that." And he scolded Dima at length, not allowing him to get a word in. Everyone looked at him with disapproval, except Mila. After this incident, Dima and Mila stubbornly went to the guru's classes for another month because they had paid in advance, and during this time they sarcastically laughed behind his back, and he understood, but could not catch them, and remained silent. Then they continued to visit Liska with some special magnetometer on their smartphone. Dima was known as a great programmer, and using this magnetometer, by measuring the magnetic field in a specific way, he hoped to find anomalous zones. You never know. There were deviations from the norm near radio towers, but also in some other places where it was difficult to suspect anything man-made, except perhaps deep underground. Dima and Mila had just climbed up a cliff above the highway running along the industrial zone, then descended, and somewhere along the trail, Dima dropped his phone. So he scrambled back up the slope, found the phone, but slipped and skidded on his butt through the reddish mud. Mila stood below, clapping her hands. He felt hurt and, continuing to drive, shouted, "What a fool!" Then they made peace and walked up into the ravine, along a path lined with tall trees. Paths and ravines ran down here from various directions, and nettles, burdock, and ferns grew along the side of the path. They reached a defensive rampart covered with earth. It was as high as 2 stories. You could walk along it, and then the star-shaped outlines of the abandoned fortress became clear. In some places, the base of the rampart was pierced by posterns, tunnels lined with ancient yellowish brick with arched entrances. Each arch bore the postern number at the top, and the walls were inscribed with the names of sentries who had stood guard in time immemorial, from the 19th to the 20th centuries. "Smart people write in newspapers, and fools write on the walls," Mila read. "Look," Dima said, "some Tishchenko has made quite a mark. He listed his year of birth everywhere, 1893, but he was on duty in 1944. A very persistent fellow, he scratched up so many bricks." One of the posterns wasn't open, but blocked at one end. The broken and damaged bricks near the darkened opening indicated that collectors had been there. "Let's go inside," Mila suggested. "There is no flashlight. We'll use our phones. By the way, your messenger hasn't been working for a while." And I turned off the sound so that we wouldn't be disturbed. You know, I didn't turn it off, but something on mine has been silent for a long time too. Mila took a smartphone out of her jeans. "There is no connection. The mark is at 0. "Everything's been glitching today. I'll check mine now." "Yeah, me too. What are we paying them for?" "Okay, let's go there anyway." Mila pointed her finger at the tunnel. "We haven't measured it yet." "Do you think there are ghosts of sentries there?" Shining their smartphone flashlights ahead, the students made their way down the underground, brick-lined passageway, which smelled of damp cement. The floor was littered with debris and dust. Nothing remarkable, like everywhere else. Dima stopped and turned back and forth. "What's in that niche?" Mila pointed her smartphone to the right. "See where the hole is knocked out in the wall?" And then behind them, there was a sharp rustling sound. Stones fell, and in the semicircular opening of light, a body began to twitch, its feet not reaching the surface. "The man hanged himself," Mila said, holding out her hand. Chapter 11. Outside the windows of the slender Boeing 737, painted like a candy wrapper, stood a blue sky and the dark green hills of the right bank of the Dnieper, with the Libid Valley between them. "The decision has been made irrevocably and finally," said the aircraft commander Syenko, lowering his head and looking at the others. Second pilot Bazov, flight attendant Alyona, and senior flight attendant Beriev. "Give up already. Why are you acting like you're in school?" Syenko smiled. About 10 minutes before the vote, everyone was silent, except for Syenko, who was conducting the most difficult radio conversations of his life. "Kiev radar. We have again set course 261 degrees. Dispatcher, gloomily. "What's going on there? Finally tell me. Are you crazy? Can you tell me?" "I already told you, sir." The dispatcher made a vague sound. Syenko finished. "We'll discuss something here. We'll get in touch in a few minutes." And he turned to the crew members. "What do you say?" "When did they close the long-distance drive to Giuliani?" Beriev asked out of the blue. That question suddenly caught my attention. He was much older than Syenko and flew first here, then from Saratov, then here again. Syenko winced. "I will answer you in the next world." "Agreed." "Let's tell them," suggested Elena, "that we have terrorists. We'll land, sit in the cockpit, and they'll somehow neutralize them in the cabin. It's a good idea, but it's more likely that those in the cabin will neutralize everyone. And then they'll move on, Cyenko said, pointing to his temples. Have I gone gray? Not yet, promised. Soon. And so this one bastard, Bazov said, who got on board sick and died, brought everyone down. That's their control system. They took everyone's temperature. For example, I don't want, said Cyenko, those we are transporting to get to my family. Me too, Elena nodded. Okay, time's running out. We don't have enough fuel for another approach. Options. The airport, if we make it. The Dmievka area, if we don't make it. We'll crash there. Or we set course for Lisaya Gora. We vote. I'm in favor of the latter. Everyone raised their hands. The decision has been made irrevocably and finally, Cyenko concluded. The dispatcher woke up. Kiev radar is on the line. Guys, we're already aware of the emergency situation. We are very happy for you. I have some bad news to tell you. They're about to send fighter jets to intercept you. Sorry, guys. It's okay. Tell them not to waste kerosene. That is? We'll be in touch in 2 minutes. Cyenko asked everyone, Do you know a parody of the song? And he explained. Then he pushed the control column forward. The plane's nose dropped. The variometer on the right side of the main screen began to fuss, showing a oh so damn fast change in altitude. Next to it, the blue half of the display, the sky, shrank, disappearing and being replaced by brown, the ground, and the black dot in the middle looked only at these solid brown pixels. Cyenko turned on the radio, and people in the cabin started singing. 1 plank, 2 plank. The coffin is being built. 1 spatula, 2 spatula. He'll bury himself. No foul language, Cyenko shouted. It's fun to walk together through the open spaces, across the vast expanses, And of course, it's better to die in chorus. Better in chorus. Better in chorus. The earth fell on them. Chapter 12. What are you interested in? The salesman, an elderly man with a broad face, approached, interrupting his conversation with a colleague. Here, among the second-hand bookstalls of Petrovka, there was at least a hint of shade and coolness. Along both sides of the path between the stalls, boxes of books nestled, their cardboard price tags sticking out. Everything for 5, everything for 20. Alice, a pseudonym of course, was rummaging around in a place where everything was priced at 10. She squatted down. She was wearing a t-shirt with a peace sign, flared pants, bracelets on her wrists, long reddish hair with a ribbon across it, and her eyes were shadowed by John Lennon-style glasses, slid down almost to the tip of her freckled nose. Hippie! She also had a cloth backpack slung over her back, with a good dozen pinned badges. Looking up, Alice replied, Yes, I'll just find it myself if there is one. Well, can I give you a hint? The second-hand bookseller did not lag behind. Do you have Fursova's Sologub and the Decadence? No, he said, and immediately went off to chat with his neighbor. Alice adopted this method of brushing off annoying salespeople from her friend Peter, who in such cases would call Yuri Trifonov, after which the salespeople's interest in him would immediately fade, since in the entire Petrovka book market there wasn't a single volume of Trifonov, or even any story in a collection. Alice's plans for today were to first stock up on cheap books, then head downtown to the vitamin store for B12, iron, and folic acid, without which, as a vegan, she would quickly begin to die. The only upside to this death spiral was that at some point during her descent into the grave, she began to perceive sound frequencies inaudible when healthy, and it was unclear what these frequencies were related to, whether manifestations of the invisible world or the operation of air conditioners and engines. Alice spent about an hour and a half crawling among the rows of books, not missing a single layout and nimbly reaching for the books tightly packed into boxes with her long, she has musical fingers, which made her hands turn gray with dust, and Alice wiped them with napkins. And she was quite the shopping spree. The books were pressing against her back through the backpack. Then she moved on to the flea market, because the book market continued into a crowded market, squeezed between the concrete wall of the railway, the Petrovka station, and the fenced-in buildings of the Mayak factory. The white sun bleached the junk dealers and the crowd. Alluring belongings of the dead from decades past were laid out on oilcloths along the street. Rusty axes, polished samovars, stolen cell phones without chargers, badges, pornographic videotapes, expired contraband chocolate bars, pasta, and expensive commander's watches. The bars were melting. The watch cases were almost red hot. Pour water into a samovar, and it would boil. Alice slowly trudged along the right side. Then she'd reach the end of the crush, where the piss-stained, rail-lined passage to the Zenit platform led, and then head back toward the metro, inspecting the left side. Her wallet wouldn't be stolen along the way, like it had been recently. If a person doesn't have a wallet, it can't be stolen. Thieves, you've been shamed. Next to the plaster bust of Lenin stood a dark iron, the kind you set and warm up. Alice bent down and picked it up. Chuskholi! What is the price? A man in a straw hat emerged from the fence. This? What do you think? I don't know. Well, I don't know either. He seemed offended and returned to the wall. Then another dealer approached him, holding a bottle of water. A heated and political conversation ensued. They were so busy that Alice placed a $10 bill on the cardboard, hiding the iron in her backpack as she went. Hey, girl! Came after her. Hey! She got lost in the crowd. Now it's a pain to go back. Damn, you asked for it. Maybe an iron like that, being a rarity, is worth a fortune? Probably at least 100. Although, rusty as it is, it's worth a pretty penny. She paid a fair price. I'll have to look online to see what these irons cost. How can I get to the metro now? Apparently, records were being sold, in several boxes. Elisa approached, but she was too lazy to sort through the records with her overstuffed backpack, or take it off. Next to the boxes, on a stool, under an umbrella, sat a long-haired guy with a gray beard, resembling the esotericist Parmalyuk, but of course it wasn't him. Do you have any 60s rock? Alice asked. Deep Purple, the guy spat proudly, looking ahead. That's not quite what I need. Psychedelics from those days. Rotary connection. Red Crayola. Where from? The seller objected. Only Deep Purple. Or by Modern Talking. I'll give it a cheaper price. And he started humming a song by the aforementioned group. It came out like this. Yo ma ha, yo ma so. Seeing that Alice was not inspired, he added, They had another popular thing. And again he sang in a sweet voice. Chevy, Chevy, Levy. Further along the flea market, a crush began. Or rather, people began running from there, stamping loudly. A few, but they seemed to be dragging others along with them. Then a cry. Oh, he bit me! Just as the sea parted before Moses, so the crowd parted along two banks, climbing onto phones, cassettes, jeans, berets. In the corridor that had formed, a man dressed in a dark down jacket and wearing a knitted cap was moving quickly, tripping over his feet but not falling. At first, Alice thought he was a homeless person. They sometimes dress like that inappropriately. Or a madman. They also sometimes dress inappropriately. But his face was deformed by decay. From afar, the man continued to shout, "I'm going to die now! I'm bleeding! Call an ambulance!" Alice noticed that the stool next to her was empty and the umbrella was lying on the floor. The zombie stopped, hissed, and turned to the side, arms outstretched. Alice now saw him from behind. Two burly men with fire axes ran up silently from the left and began hacking at the zombies with such precision as if they'd been doing this their whole lives. Dull blows could be heard in the silence and discordant voices. The body fell, twitching. "Cut off his hands!" The long-haired salesman appeared, screaming at the top of his lungs. He raised his clenched fists. To the right, from the end of the flea market where the zombie had come from, a commotion and shouting began again. People ran silently, looking around. One of the flea market women slowed down and explained as she ran, "The one who was bitten died and came back to life." She carried those last words with her as she departed. The crowd, like a receding wave, left behind an empty street with merchandise abandoned by the side of the road. Only a few junk dealers quickly gathering their goods into bags. Or perhaps these were the thieves who had stolen Alice's wallet. And there, near the book market, someone started shooting. Part of the human stream poured into a side street. The rest scurried about. Some ran back to the flea market, and their numbers grew. It seemed more people were pressing in. From the metro station and the entire interchange there, yes, from where the big traffic circle was, the bus stops, the poppy seed store, the secondhand stores, the long barn of the snack bar, where the music store known as Three Junkies used to be. The one Elisa used to go there as a teenager. A very clear thought occurred to her. Alice dropped her backpack on the pavement and picked up the iron. "It's heavy." "Good. Books? To hell with them." Without waiting for the crowd to catch up with her, she ran away, towards the turnoff to the Zenit platform, and yes, she would be able to get out onto the avenue. The street stretched on forever. Then it widened into a square, on the left filled with metal, numbered containers, and occupied by trays of electronics. Power supplies peeking out of plastic baskets, dust-covered VCRs piled one on top of the other. A bike rack. There was no one nearby. Alice grabbed the first one that showed up. She mounted and pedaled. It moved without a click. She'd return the money later. Everything would return to normal, wouldn't it? Civilization is just like that. It sagged a little, but it will right itself. It will right itself. Just wait a bit. The bike was unusual. The last time she rode it was in the early 2000s, but perhaps the ability to maintain balance is akin to swimming. Once you learn it, you don't forget it. She steered with one hand and held the iron in the other, lowered. Alice had noticeably pulled away from the runners, though she hadn't had time to look back or even around. She just seemed to see. No, it was real. A man sitting next to an ancient spindle, a scythe stuck in his head. And he seemed unable to rise. The shaft was in the way. Then the road narrowed again, and a turnoff onto the avenue opened up on the right, and she still had to get to the platform. Crushing over the small pieces of junk scattered across the asphalt, she even rolled over a wristwatch, which snapped with a crunch. Alice rounded the corner along the concrete wall and immediately began to veer left, because God knows what was happening on the avenue. Black smoke billowed from the scattered, wrecked cars. People scurried about. Some were being torn apart by others. No longer human. She pulled up to the opposite wall, covered in graffiti. Behind it was a railroad. In front of the wall was a raised pedestrian walkway, and Alice jumped off her bike and dragged it up to the curb. Where two concrete fences met, a gap and a passageway across the tracks were visible. Having burst in, Alice stopped, wondering where to go next. The tracks branched off to the right, between the garages overgrown with greenery on either side, and to the left, back toward Petrovka. Without mounting her bike, Alice dragged it forward across the tracks and began to walk around the platform. Otherwise, she'd have to crouch underneath it. And besides, someone was rummaging around. Oilcloths with junk were laid out along the sides of the tracks. Jeans, spoons, forks, baby clothes. What are you interested in? Come on over and ask. Several people were quietly wandering among the piles, rummaging around anxiously, choosing whatever caught their eye. Alice rolled on again. A right would have taken her onto the avenue, so she veered left and, near an ash tree, turned onto the first street leading into the industrial zone. Several cars were parked along the fences, and beyond lay incredibly potholed asphalt with puddles. The color of coffee with milk, Alice thought fondly. She ran through them, splashing her pants. She stopped, put her feet on the ground, and tried to call her mom on her cell phone. Her dad, Andre. The line was overloaded. The road was blocked by a chain-link gate, one of which was open, and Alice drove through it. Beyond that, she found a parking lot that took up part of the street. The pavement was good. Alice flew out onto an intersection. Ahead, on one side, lay the industrial zone, on the other, residential buildings. Slowing down, Alice crossed the wide street. There were no cars, no people, and continued along the same narrow street that continued on the other side. Khrushchev-era apartment buildings peeked out from behind the chestnut trees. A blue sign read Tulchinskaya Street. To her left, squat buildings and hangars rose from behind a brick factory fence topped with twisted barbed wire. Surely it would be safe there, beyond the fence. She was lost in her stare and only just caught a glimpse of a lone man in the middle of the street. He had his arms outstretched like a scarecrow. He was young, with a beard, his hat askew. His crooked mouth moved senselessly. Alice turned the steering wheel to go around, but the front wheel started spinning on the steering wheel axis, and she fell sideways, head first, losing the iron. Thud, he fell short. And then the hand she put out to absorb the blow, scraped against the sandpaper of the asphalt, but it didn't help at all. And Alice felt a hot pain on the left side of her face. But then, with sharp convulsions, she somehow got out from under the bike frame. I was afraid to touch my face. I was afraid to open my left eye. Is this possible? The guy in the hat grabbed his lower jaw with his hands and pulled it down, pulling it and his head toward his chest. Alice, first on all fours, then standing up, with buckling legs, began to approach the iron lying idle. All this was happening next to the locked gates of the entrance to the factory, and on the other side, through a front garden with maples, there was a long Khrushchev-era building, and good people were standing at their windows, watching. Chapter 13. High in the clear sky, helicopters circled in the blue. If only they could reach them, the birds would probably befriend them. Ira even waved her hands at the helicopters, but they didn't see her. Or maybe they didn't want to. Because how could you not see a person walking alone across a steppe the color of ripe wheat? The booming roar died down. The helicopters shrank to specks and vanished. Where's the dead man? There's the dead man, right here, on your smartphone. Recorded on video, his feet caught in the snags along the shore. Ira wandered around the island at random, following only one rule: never return to the Lastochka Recreation Center. Sooner or later, she'd reach the banks of the Dnieper or Chertoroy. Follow them. Left along the Dnieper, right along the Chertoroy, and reach the bridge. It's even easier than sticking to one side of the maze. She passed through strange places, A row of lampposts, but without lanterns, with wires strung between them, jutted out of the meadow. Further on, an entire stretch of steppe, as far as the eye could see, was scorched and black, the darkness mixed with gray ash. There was a smell of burning here. And here, on a hillock, dry trees were curled up. Ira didn't take off her bicycle helmet. It attracted the heat, but kept it out of her head. "Keep your feet warm and your head cool," advised General Suvorov. The path was blocked by a swamp, seemingly cutting the island in half. Along it, sentinels, poplars, aspens, and sedges, stood in 2 rows. Ira turned left and crossed a dirt path through a hollow in a drained section of the swamp. Its bottom, dark with moisture, was scarred by bicycle tires. Ira remembered riding here with Igor. Concrete posts jutted out of the ground at the swamp, preventing cars from driving onto the part of the island Ira had come from. There was at least some shade here, but Ira was still tormented by thirst. A 3-dimensional can of Coke kept swirling in her mind. She'd have to stop by the swamp and try it. The frogs were croaking, meaning the water was clean. What about E. coli? What about salmonella? And finally, dysentery. Not drinking meant not getting there. Ira had made up her mind and was about to skirt the weeds, acacia bushes, and a large willow to reach the water when she heard cheerful singing, and a cyclist in a light green and gray suit appeared on the hill on the opposite bank of the ravine. He had a long face hidden behind smoky brown glasses and a long helmet that matched his face. Stopped. "Oh, fellow bike shop worker, where's your bike?" Ira wanted to lay out everything, but laid out only half. "It was stolen from me, and now I'm walking back to the bridge." "Oh, how sad." The voice remained joyful and smooth. "What if I give you a lift there?" "I was just about to ask you about this." "Get on the trunk." Ira climbed the hill, went behind the cyclist and settled down, dangling both legs over the side of the wheel. The cyclist rode off. "Hold on to me." But Ira held on to the saddle. They slid down a dry riverbed and emerged on the other bank. "We're not going there," said Ira. "I know a quick detour." "My name is Igor." "Another Igor." "My name is Ira." "Very nice." The bike followed a double dirt track alongside a swampy canal marked by trees in the steppe. To the right, a vast field stretched out to the groves on the horizon. The thick, corrugated wheels devoured the trail. "I want to warn you," Ira began. "What they're saying in the news about zombies is already happening in Kiev." "Yes, I know," Igor answered. "How do you know?" "And now you will tell me about the Lastochka Recreation Center." "Yes, I know all about it. The zombies have been living there for a long time, for 2 years now. I've been watching them. They can't get out because they don't know how to cross the water. There's water all around anyway, so there's nowhere for them to run, and if they do, they're driven back." "Who's driving?" Igor didn't answer. After a pause, he continued. "They're completely self-sufficient there. A self-protected facility, experimental colony number 2. If cyclists go missing, no one looks for them there. They think they drowned, especially since the police find abandoned bikes on the banks of the Dnieper, for example, closer to civilization. Divers search and search, but they don't find them. Well, that means they were carried away by the current." The sun seemed to melt Ira's bike helmet and lull her to sleep. It was wonderful. A joyful voice almost sang. "And I'm still bringing back the biosubstrates. Project Lazarus.
All the trails lead to Kiev, but no one's figured it out. Her head tightened and expanded. Ira came to, jumped off the trunk while moving, fell on all fours, immediately rose, and ran toward the row of trees where the swamp was. She tore through the bushes and reeds with her hands. Her feet were wet. Instead of a swamp, a fairly wide, clear lake with water lilies at the shore awaited her. On the raised opposite bank, aspens, their white trunks resembling birches, were hidden among the small acacia trees.
Tearing off her helmet and throwing off her backpack, Ira ran into the immediately chilling water and swam to the other side. It was unusually difficult in her sneakers. There was a short pop from behind, and something clicked, not painfully, on the right side of her neck. And then Ira saw how the water nearby was filling with red. She swam without stopping, crawl, breaststroke, doggy paddle, alternating. The lilies, yellow lilies, how they must smell. Oh my God, they were getting closer. She turned around. How far she had sailed. There was no one on the other side, only greenery, branched poplars. She touched her neck. It was wet and swollen, hot. She looked at her palm, covered in blood. She went down to the water, glanced at the flickering reflection, and vaguely made out a long line under her jaw. Her heart calmed down. The bullet had only grazed her. But then she realized that Igor, who was connected with the Lazarus Project, was probably now driving around the lake again and would soon be here. Chapter 14. Without thinking, Pasha turned through the barrier into the green courtyards, past the two-story house, toward other brick buildings. Since there was no one in the punkmobile and no traces of blood, that meant Ivanilov and Yana had gotten out and were probably hiding somewhere nearby, maybe in the house next door. He pulled up the hood of his hazmat suit and, lowering one hand to conceal a long knife, knocked with the other on the first-floor window, probably someone's kitchen. In a deep, solemn voice. "Hey, residents, Military Epidemiological Service, check." Nobody answered. "You can't get snow in winter." Pasha passed the locked door into the front door and knocked on another window. "0 to ground." He turned and looked around. A path led past a rusty lamppost to the next building, this one 5-story and awkward-looking, between the fence and the garages. A squat white shed stood by the last garage, and someone was pounding on its door from the other side. A low growl, or perhaps a groan, could be heard. Pasha didn't need to go to that barn at all, but he did. Along the path trampled through the tall grass, and the door swung open. Pasha jumped back, raised the knife, waved it in front of himself, and then saw Ivanilov's glasses and his shaggy head. "Ah, what a dummy," Ivanilov laughed. Pasha started cursing. Yana followed him out of the darkness of the barn. She and Ivanilov had already changed out of their chemical treatment and homeless clothes and back into civilian clothes. They stood under a birch tree near the garage. He chickened out, Ivanilov repeated. "I came to save you," Pasha answered. "We had a great ride, and then they abandoned us. The zombies went off somewhere." "To the meeting," Yana said. "Probably." They left. We sat for a while, listened, and then climbed out. Then we hid here. "And why are you wearing chemicals?" "There was no time to take it off. It's safer this way." "What if they just touch and transmit their zombiness?" "I think you have to get bitten first, or get that thing that acts like the flu, and then if you die, bam, you come back to life." "We need to get out of here. We're standing here getting caught," Pasha said, looking around. The yard was empty. Only a tortoiseshell cat scurried past a lilac bush and disappeared through a small basement window. "So what do we do next?" Yana asked. "Just like before. We'll head out to Libid and hit the road. It's definitely safer this way," Pasha replied. "Doesn't it bother you that if we turn toward Libid now, there'll be a mountain with Baikovo Cemetery on the right?" Ivanilov countered. "I'm somehow more afraid of those who died recently and are wandering around here than those who were buried long ago. Besides, there's still a railroad between the hill and Libid, and they've probably already built a fence along it. I'm all for going back to Libid." "I guess so too," said Yana. "Well, I'm with you. There's no other way," Ivanilov agreed. The three of them walked across the courtyard, passing the house. Ivanilov picked up a half brick from the asphalt and turned to the windows. "You bastards! Why didn't you let us in, you bastards?" He threw a brick at the window with all his might. It clanged loudly, shattering into hundreds of pieces. The boys took a few steps when a serious, bushy-browed man in a t-shirt appeared in the window frame. He seemed to raise his hand. 2 shots rang out and echoed off the walls. Ivanilov's glasses burst across the bridge of his nose, and a circle of blood ran across his mouth. He either managed to let out a quiet scream, or maybe just from his throat. He fell to his knees, then flat on the ground, face down on the asphalt, twitching weakly. "I'll dig it!" Pasha ran forward with his knife raised. The 3rd shot. Pasha drops the long knife, grabs his shoulder. Yana runs up and pulls him around the corner of the house. "I'll dig it!" Pasha croaks, almost hisses, straining his veins in a high-pitched voice. "I'll dig it!" An unbearable sadness weighs on Yana's chin and her eyes, so focused right now. The blue sky looks down from above. 4th shot. 5th. Chapter 15. There were no windows in this room, and the walls were covered with sound-absorbing panels like massage brushes, black, with rows of protruding cones. Similar panels, only flat, made of polyester fiber, covered the floor and ceiling, which is why Nikolai hadn't heard the prolonged screams and gunfire from the floor above today, nor had he heard them stop. In fact, both his floor and the one above were underground. In the room, almost in the middle, there was a table with a powerful computer, and on the sides of the opposite wall hung monitors, speakers of a professional acoustic system, directed at a slight angle towards the middle. Nikolai drank coffee and stared at the screen. A cigarette, held between 2 fingers, was smoking. He hadn't eaten anything for 2 days, and huge dark circles had appeared under his eyes. The door opened. First Alexei looked in, then he came in. "We're working," Nikolai said without looking up. After thinking for a moment, he asked, "What about the neighbors? They're looking for the library of Ivan the Terrible." "Well?" Alexei sat down on a small, soft chair in the corner. He'd sat here all day yesterday, bringing an audio file on a flash drive for research. There was no internet in the room for security reasons. Yesterday had been a very funny day, when Nikolai might have realized the world was already beginning to crumble. Why not just sit here all night and go home? And now they're stuck here. 1 floor below, the dead are walking in the cafeteria, followed by flies. 1 floor above, soldiers who tried to break through here and failed are swimming in blood. The elevator is blocked. The door by the stairs is barricaded. And what's going on in the library? On the surface, it's a library. What do you think? On the surface, who knows? The cameras have stopped transmitting. Alexei brought a flash drive yesterday and asked me to extract everything possible from the audio recording. What was it recorded on? Where? What Nikolai could tell me about the voices and so on. Where did the file come from? It was discovered that a skinny kid in dark glasses and Adidas boots had walked into an internet club in Bortnichi, without indoor video surveillance, of course. At 2:30 p.m., he sat down at his computer, created an email account that didn't require a phone number, and sent the file to a known address. Then he left. Nikolai transferred the file from the flash drive to the hard drive, and he and Alexei began listening. Alexei had already familiarized himself with the recording, but for Nikolai, it was a first. The conversation involved two male voices, recorded on a mobile device. An analyzer immediately identified the model based on the dips in the frequency spectrum. In MP3 format, with a bit rate of 128 kilobits per second, in stereo. Judging by the acoustic environment, the conversation took place in an open-air cafe. Nikolai asked Alexei, "Why should we attach importance to this file?" He came to the right address. "Understood." He unpaused the playback. "Please introduce yourself," said the first voice. Nikolai found it strange. "What do you prefer to call me?" "Let it be, for example, Yura." "Great, I like it. Then I'll call you, say, Misha." "Excellent, Yura. Tell those listening why you agreed to this conversation." "You paid me well." "I confirm." Nikolai pressed pause. "What is it?" asked Alexei. "Their voices are distorted. Yura's pitch is raised, the bass frequency, and Misha's is lowered. It's obvious." Alexei waited. Nikolai continued. "Considering the normal background pitch, meaning the ambience isn't distorted, we can say that two separate audio tracks, also recorded separately and pitch shifted, were overlaid onto the previously recorded background. So, Yura and Misha's conversation is a montage, designed to create the feeling of a conversation recorded in a street cafe. If I now pitch shift Misha's voice and raise the frequency, I think we'll get Yura's voice, which, however, has probably been filtered. Let's try it." He brought up the pitch shifter window and applied the effect to a short section of the waveform, a compressed sine wave that spread across the screen. Play. "Yeah, sounds like Yura." Alexei smiled. "So why did he do that? He could have given it to the robot to read. But this is some kind of pioneering thing, in the spirit of those movie maniacs or terrorists, when the screenwriter just makes up the mystery out of nothing." "The guy did the right thing," Nikolai replied. He wasn't sure that the speech synthesizer wouldn't leak the processed text to some evil corporation. "Ah, I see. Makes sense." So, one person is having a conversation with himself. Let's continue. One more thing. Nikolai selected the audio fragment containing Misha's voice with his mouse, played it in a loop, and, listening to the repeating recording, moved the sliders on the pitch shifter. And now, Misha's voice lost its strangeness and became feminine. Nikolai did the same with Yura's voice. Both voices belong to some woman, Alexei realized. Yes. Nikolai pressed the space bar and the conversation started again. "Yura, tell me, aren't you afraid of being exposed? I would be afraid, but nothing can be stopped now." "Then why do you need money? Doesn't that mean everything will be all right again?" "I've always dreamed of holding such a sum in my hands." Nikolai pressed stop again. "We are wasting time on nonsense. Listen further." Nikolai took the pause off. "What's happening in the world now isn't the beginning. It's a development." "And when did it begin?" "Let me finish my thought. This has happened before, but we've always managed to contain the incidents. Have you heard of the 1976 incident in Guajolotes? I didn't hear anything. The voice seemed to smile. Guajolotes, Mexico. Cotton fields were sprayed from an airplane, allegedly with toxogen. Then, the farmers who went into the fields began to fall ill, also allegedly with the flu. The area was quickly quarantined, with Mexican authorities there more or less covering up the operation being carried out by the American military. In short, no one left the village for several months, while the Americans removed sealed containers containing living corpses. So this was originally an American project? No. Various organizations and companies conduct research and experiments in this area from time to time. It's safe to say that someone has been using them for over 100 years, from time to time. There are breaks in this activity, but the oldest project in this field has been going on for over 100 years, and its center is the city of Kyiv. What are the components of this activity? All of this can be likened to a network that produces certain substances, tests them, and transmits the resulting data to somewhere outside the network. The network includes, in addition to pharmaceutical companies, some drug labs, and drug dealers distribute drugs laced with the substance being tested. Users of these drugs then write and post so-called trip reports online, describing their experiences, and the network collects this information. So the substance is not directly related to zombies. You don't understand. The stuff coming out of the drug labs is used to test part of the formula. The other part of the network is sports chemistry and doping disguise. What does Kyiv have to do with this? The Lazarus Project, the oldest known on the internet. Is Lazarus a reference to the biblical resurrection of Lazarus by Christ? No. In Kyiv, on Amasova Street, next to Baikove Cemetery, is the clinical town. There's an ancient building there, the Bacteriological Institute. Sugar magnate Lazar Brodsky donated funds for it before the 1917 revolution. Now the building belongs to a pharmaceutical company, but few people know that hidden underground in the same part of the mountain is a duplicate of this building, similar in architecture, but completely unrelated to the one above ground. And so, while, before the revolution, during the Soviet era, and now, work was done openly in the building above ground, other specialists worked underground, working on completely different tasks, although sometimes the same employee worked both above and below ground. The heart of the Lazar Project is right there. Did Lazar Brodsky know about this secret laboratory? No, he simply gave the money. They skimped on some things. Someone else contributed extra funds, and a duplicate was built, fully equipped, except without the windows and with different lighting. All electric, no natural light. And the proximity to the cemetery was no coincidence, as you can imagine. What is the Lazarus Project currently doing? By the way, they exist officially. It's easier that way, although under a different name. They have a legal address, even an office. They produce various things, like a bacteriophage against Pseudomonas aeruginosa. They employ top-class specialists in cytology and microbiology. They have equipment worth millions of dollars. Several confocal microscopes, Nikon, Carl Zeiss. A 32-element array of photographic enlargement tubes for such a thing recently cost them $100,000. Why do they need this? Among other things, it's used to study Forster energy transfer, which is related to the supposed, I repeat, supposed, toxogen that was sprayed over cotton fields. Fluorescent proteins, genetically linked to other proteins, are used to study living organisms. Living organisms. Such proteins are tracked using confocal microscopy. What is the difference between the living and the dead? We call this anima, distinguishing between the natural and the man-made. Nikolai stopped the recording. I have a headache. That was yesterday. Today, Alexei was sitting in the chair again, and they were listening to the recording together. In a soundproof room. Then the door opened. A man in a black protective suit with shoulder and knee pads appeared on the threshold, with an oxygen tube running from behind his back into his helmet. Alexei raised his head and said to him, "They might have leaked to us how to save humanity. We're sitting here, figuring it out." "Everyone on your floor is infected," came the speaker on his helmet's respirator. Alexei twitched under the machine gun fire, and Nikolai calmly lifted a cup of coffee to his mouth as his brains, along with skull fragments and clumps of hair, splattered onto the display. A wet cough came over the speaker. The man pulled a pistol from its holster, placed the barrel against the bridge of his nose. It was reflected in the anti-fragmentation plate covering his eyes, and pulled the trigger. Chapter 16. Early that morning, the chimney sweep arrived at the foot of Protasov Yar on the number 40 trolleybus, just as Vesta and Lena were already at the stop, having even managed to walk a little further and take some photos of Dokuchayevsky Lane, a scattering of private houses along a narrow road in a ravine that ended at a landfill. The chimney sweep stepped off the trolleybus looking like a tourist in Hawaii, a bright t-shirt, a Panama hat on his head. He imagined himself as Johnny Depp, playing the drug addict in Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. But besides these street clothes, he had other clothes in his backpack, ones he wouldn't be ashamed to wear underground. Rumors of underground passages near the old Institute of Bacteriology building had been circulating among diggers for years, but no one knew how to get there, as the building stood on private property and was inaccessible. Recently, the chimney sweep took part in a protest against development in Protasov Yar. On his way back, passing the bare, grassy slope of the ski slope, overlooked by the clinical town buildings, he spotted a drainage manhole in the adjacent dark grove that covered the bank of the ravine. He turned there and, using the crowbar he always carried, pried open the manhole. The drainage manhole was most likely connected to the Protasov Yar stream. Steps led down the circular concrete shaft with brackets. The chimney sweep shone a flashlight down it. He estimated it was about 15 meters. The structure somehow didn't fit in with the usual slope drainage system. The chimney sweep quickly glanced around, hid his backpack in the bushes, and climbed down. He was surprised to see that the staples weren't rusty, as was usually the case, but clean and smooth, as if they were used daily. Below was a passage, also circular in cross-section, a large concrete pipe in which he could stand upright. It extended roughly eastward, towards the Bacteriology Institute, the chimney sweep realized. The flashlight's power only lasted so far. The end of the tunnel was invisible. Darkness thickened beyond. Overcoming the strong desire to move on, the chimney sweep climbed to the surface, put on his backpack, and put the hatch back in place. There aren't many unexplored underground sites left in Kyiv, not counting the ancient caves and inaccessible slopes, where no one but the most reckless local historians have ever explored. So the chimney sweep held back his discovery, and now decided to show off his pioneering skills by inviting 2 female diggers to share his discovery. The result was supposed to be a video recording, not a written report with photographs. And so they met at the bus stop. Along it, supporting the right bank of Protasov Yar, stretched a stone wall, completely covered in graffiti. On the hill, among the greenery, old private houses were visible, lining the street. The ravine itself, once wild and pitted with the clayey remains of brick factories, was now also a wide street, gradually gaining altitude between slopes, some overgrown, some already built up. On one side, Batu Mountain began gently. On the other, where Clinical Town stood, was the cemetery-like Baikova Mountain, which, here in the lower reaches of the ravine, was steeper. A moldy-colored building peeked out from behind the dark maples. The diggers returned a little to the zebra crossing, crossed to Baikova Mountain, and began to climb along the sidewalk of Protasov Yar. "Pasha invited me to Kyiv today," said Lena. "But how long can this go on? I've already walked all over it." Vesta knew that Lena was lying, because Lena had only been to Klova a few times, and had only gone as far as the fork behind the sports palace, where the Kreshatik stream flows into the Klova collector. The chimney sweep pointed to the highway and discovered America. "There's a hidden stream here, too, the light sand cave collector. If we get through it quickly, we can squeeze in there, too. It's a piece of cake, but at first it's about 2 meters high. Then you have to duck down, lower than your height." "It promotes stooping," Vesta said. She was tempted to catch the chimney sweep in a lie, too, because in the Protasov Yar stream collector, after walking hunched over like a monk, one must squat or crawl due to the raised surface of the passage caused by sand deposits. Vesta had climbed there last year, cursing everything under the sun. "Who did Pasha go with?" she asked. "With Ivanilov and another girl, not from Asis. And Pasha is still obsessed with the idea of finding a passage under Mariinsky. Yes, that's why he goes there." The graffiti-covered retaining wall on the opposite side ended, giving way to a new residential complex and Dokuchayevsky Lane, which stretched deep into green gardens, beyond which, along Protasov, the tree-covered mountain continued. On the northern slope, Vesta recalled, archaeologists excavated some ancient cave. "Yes, Goisman told me about it. He apparently dug it up himself. We can look for that too, but not today." They trudged along the southern slope, undermined by the huts of auto repair shops. They turned toward the grassy tongue of the ski trail, and from there, near the cable car, into the thicket. From the sought-after well, the drainage workers moved a little further, where they all donned hazmat suits. Who knows? A bacteriology institute has been operating up there for over a century. Who knows what leaks have occurred there, how the sewer system there is structured, and especially how it was constructed when it was first founded. Even in the shade, the air was hot and humid from the overnight rain. Rain in the evening, rain overnight. The forecast calls for sunny weather, with a high of 36 degrees Celsius. Only when we started to descend into the mine, with each step down it became colder. And finally, at the very bottom, when we exhaled, we even began to steam. "It looks like," Vesta said, "someone's going to work here. The steps are clean." "Yes, a sacred place," answered the chimney sweep. The sounds echoed dully into the round corridor that ended who knows where. Using 3 powerful handheld flashlights and 3 headlamps to pierce the darkness ahead, they moved forward. The chimney sweep filmed the scene on his smartphone. "No rats, no water. What kind of drainage system is this?" Lena asked. "I don't understand it myself." The chimney sweep stopped and tapped his knuckle on the wall. "How far have we gone already?" Vesta shone the flashlight back. "Damn it, about 50 meters. Oh, there seems to be a turn ahead." Streams of light stopped at the bend of the tunnel. "Do you hear?" Vesta asked, alarmed. "What?" From around the corner, a quiet, short squeak could be heard from time to time. There was something hoarse and electronic about it. "Turn off the lanterns, quickly," the chimney sweep hissed. And so they did. It turned out that along with the beeping, a faint flickering was emanating from there. Flickering, darkness. Flickering, darkness. Everyone stood and waited. Nothing happened. Vesta, knees half bent, crept up to the turn and peered around the corner. A white dot flickered on and off. Vesta turned on the flashlight. "Hey, come here," she called to the others. They came over. "Oops, the door," said the chimney sweep. Look, Vesta said, running her hand over the panel on the right. That's where the light was blinking. A fingerprint sensor, and that's probably an iris scanner. There's also a little slot, like you could insert a card into. It's something secret, the chimney sweep guessed importantly. I don't really want to stay here. Yes, we're climbing back, Vesta agreed. They quickly returned to the ladder and climbed up its brackets. A full, hot, green world. We changed into civilian clothes, hid the chemicals in our backpacks, and reached the highway in the middle of a wide valley. Everything seemed to freeze. Guys, what a strange silence, Vesta said. There wasn't a trolley bus or car. No pedestrians were passing, but who cares? People rarely walk here. The city noise came from far away, and it was an unusual noise. Ambulances howled softly, heartbreakingly. The chimney sweep suggested, "Okay, there's a manhole cover up ahead, leading to the Protasov Yar sewer. There's no traffic on the road, so we can quickly turn around and get set up. We've already changed our clothes. Let's go back and have a rest?" "No, I've had enough adventures for today," Vesta objected. And above the ski trail, but across the road, to the left of a ravine like this, a steep hill was visible, a spur of the Protasov Yar bank. A path ran up it toward the enormous maple trees. Vesta had once been there. If you continued along the enormous earthen hump, you'd reach the residential buildings of Solomenka, but before them would be a slope with abandoned cellars dug out of the brown loam. It was those cellars that Vesta had studied. Some people study science, but Vesta studied abandoned cellars. A crowd of people emerged from the hillock above. At first they moved along the path like ants, then they began to ooze out from under the maple trees, filling the entire hill. They moved strangely. "Oh," said the chimney sweep, "the Save Protasov Yar campaign is happening again. But I don't see any police or thugs." And the crowd poured disorganized down the empty highway. There seemed to be children among them, but they weren't walking with their parents, but on their own, separately. The children walked separately along the road. "Are they filming some kind of movie here?" Lena suggested. "It's a zombie," Vesta understood clearly. "It's not a movie." From above, an ambulance burst around the bend, its red and blue lights flashing and its thrumming howl blaring. It slammed into the crowd from behind, crushing frantically moving figures beneath its wheels. With a clanking sound, it crashed into a steel lamppost and stopped immediately, its rear bouncing slightly. A bang. Clouds of black smoke billowed out from under the shattered hood. Fire engulfed the interior of the cab. "Follow me!" Vesta ran across the road toward the tree-covered part of the slope. She disappeared into the bushes, climbed a little higher on the damp earth, and looked back. No one was following her. Not zombies, not friends. The dead had already reached the ravine separating the hillock, with the path from the knoll where Lena had hidden, and were continuing down the highway. Through the foliage, she vaguely glimpsed the backs of the chimney sweep and Lena. They were also running down. Resisting the urge to climb further, even as zombies began to pass her at a distance of a dozen steps, she watched. Lena and the chimney sweep reached Dokuchayevsky Lane, but a disorderly crowd of corpses was also moving toward them down Protasov Yar, from below. The diggers darted left into an alley and disappeared from sight. Then a single chimney sweep ran out, losing a sneaker on his way. Two groups of zombies, above and below the highway, had almost closed in and were surrounding the chimney sweep. He jumped up to a lamppost, wrapped his arms and legs around it, and tried to climb. It didn't work. In his bright t-shirt and Panama hat, he reminded Vesta of a dollar tourist in a tropical country being harassed by the locals. Then, amidst the dead chorus of groans and whines, a human cry was heard, and Vesta realized that the chimney sweep was gone. Chapter 17. Toxic's arms were numb and vibrating, as if they were humming with electricity. His head was touching the locked hatch, his hands clinging to the clamps, his back pressed against the wall of the inspection shaft. He had slung his backpack in front of him. Damn, fuck! At the bottom of the shaft, around the niche where the clamps began, black rays were painted, indicating that the hatch was not welded shut, not filled with asphalt, and could be evacuated through. But it was locked. Under Toxic's feet, clad in chemical-resistant pants, zombies splashed in the water along the Kyiv sewer. They were dressed in expensive suits. These people were usually seen on the news and political talk shows, but now, having lost the gift of articulate speech, they streamed on and on and on. Toxic had been waiting for about 15 minutes. He was thinking a lot. He'd been using this digger's nickname for several years now. Before that, he'd approached things creatively, but changed nicknames like gloves. First, he was Lomax, from the word crowbar. Then Luke, from the word hatch. Toxic. It just came naturally when he started mutating. The doctors were amazed at the tests. "Are you sure this is your urine, not gasoline?" It all started with self-improvement, with developing his mind and body. One day, he bought a whole pile of kung fu self-help books on yellowed paper on Petrovka Street, published during the Perestroika era. The pictures depicted various phases of techniques: fistfights, kicks, pole fighting, and so on. Toxic would climb onto the roof of his family's panel building on Ruzanovka Street and practice, scaring the pigeons. Sometimes he'd lose it, throw himself at the curb, peer into the abyss, and scream wildly. Then he'd return to honing his martial arts skills. In the process of hardening not only his spirit, but also his body, he decided to test the water from all the sewers he visited on his digging errands, regardless of the taps and chemicals. Afterward, he suffered from severe diarrhea many times and was hospitalized several times. The doctors couldn't figure out what was wrong with him. All those horrible pimples and rashes. Surely they weren't just acne? Toxic looked older than his 20s, had a dull, square haircut, never smiled, and, according to eyewitnesses, could break a brick in half with his palm. Drinking wastewater and underground water led to a certain philosophy. Toxic began to feel a kinship, even a oneness, with the sewer from which he drank. The underground was perceived as a home, a cozy place, its walls an impenetrable shell. While time seemed to pass more quickly above, and people rushed to live and die, Toxic spent hours, even days, in the unchanged underground, devoid of sounds and events. It was hot above, but here a pleasant coolness reigned. Above, the bitter frost would freeze his snot in mid-flight, but here a chill embraced him. He spent more and more nights there, in sewers and heating mains. He became increasingly familiar with the underground and could use the network of underground utilities to get from point A to point B, often faster and more conveniently than on the surface. He earned extra cash in a peculiar way. He stole the goods from drug dealers and then sold them to them at a low price. Traveling underground, Toxic would appear at the right spot, steal the valuables, and then disappear underground. No one, neither the drug dealers nor the police tracking them, understood what was happening or how it happened. However, Toxic didn't need money for living. He easily took canned food while infiltrating strategic warehouses. But to buy batteries, various equipment, and pay for his cell phone service. Cell phone service was the only reason to appear above ground, as there was no service underground. Going underground cuts off all contact with the outside world. And finally, the zombies. Clearly stomping here from the government quarter, passed. The grounds below were empty. The toxic hovered for a moment longer. Maybe someone was catching up with the crowd. But the quiet, constant sound of water could be heard. Digger climbed down and carefully followed the zombie toward the sewer exit. The water didn't reach his knees. Along the wide, arched corridor, the Kyiv River flowed in complete darkness, if not for the flashlight. I want to live and know what emptiness is. The letters on the wall faded. They were read by the thousands of mosquitoes sitting there. Toxic climbed over a rusty cross pipe. How did the zombies get past it? They're supposed to be as dumb as boots. He moved on. The exit was soon. On the left, a flashlight illuminated a black plaque with a semicircle and a snowflake at the top, and the inscription. They went into the darkness, although they strove for the light. In memory, Alexandra Zinchenko, Hartman, 22, and Alexandra Kranyuchenko, Amper, 15L. Killed in Klova on August 23, 2003. When there is a downpour in the sun, out there in the wide world, all the waters of the world flow furiously through the Kyiv collector, limited and quickly filling, and then furiously burst out of the portal into Libed. The portal was now quiet, its two rectangular corridors gushing dark water down narrow troughs, turning into a low, clear waterfall. Graffiti along the right corridor warned, "This is the entrance to another world," and pointed a curved arrow, resembling a spade, inward. Toxic turned left, through Friday Clove. He figured that if the zombies had gotten out, they'd wandered further downstream, and they wouldn't be able to get out of the Libed sewer trench. They'd have to climb up. The wisest and safest thing to do now was to stay behind them and keep an eye on them. He walked slowly, keeping the terrifying crowd of ice cream and chocolate bars visible far ahead, but still within his field of vision. He reached the bridge that led to Protasov Yar. There, on the other side of the concrete gutter, lay the gnawed remains in a red puddle. They moved feebly. Toxic moved to the other side and looked at it for a long time, turning his head. Then he returned to the left bank and noticed something almost under the bridge. The chimney sweep's recognizable Panama hat. He stood in the water further on, beyond the bridge, facing this way, hunched over and mindlessly touching the river with his hands. Perhaps he was drawn to the turbulence that arose around his hands as he dipped them into the water. Toxic approached and also began to gaze at the living corpse as if it were a curiosity, blinking his eyes and looking around, as if asking the whole wide world, "Has anyone ever seen such a thing? What kind of miracle is this?" He kicked the chimney sweep into the water with a spinning motion. He fell backwards like a scarecrow, his arms slowly flailing. The water poured over him, and he gurgled. Toxic approached the small, cozy portal of the Protasov Yar stream and was about to climb in. But then, out of the corner of his eye, he spotted movement to the left, above the wall of the Libed River's outer trench. There, in the gap between the yellow house and the green recycling booth, a tall man in silver hazmat suit flashed by, holding a long kitchen knife. Toxic recognized Pasha. He carefully crept up to the little house, crept past its wall with a metal ladder shaped like a U, 2 steps up, leaning against it, and peered around the corner. Pasha walked cautiously and slowly along the quiet Yamskaya street, and the trees, like footmen in leafy livery, stood on either side, bowing respectfully. Chapter 18. The woman, smelling of incense, drawn away from the trolley bus by Kanarin, walked and walked, described a circle, and returned with Kanarin to their previous place. For an endless second, Kanarin gazed greedily at the artist's house, once the only high-rise in the area, his home, standing between two chestnut trees, behind the stadium, behind the squat vocational school building, like a white and yellow pillar against the heat-dim sky. He had to get there. A pale zombie with a broken nose emerged from under a trolleybus blocking the street. Inside, people screamed, smearing their blood across the windows. Kanarin called out to the incense-scented woman. "Follow me, we're going that way," he said, pointing to a cake-shaped building with a colonnade, the former Slava Cinema, now converted into the Veterans Palace. No one wants to go around the vocational school and the intersection where the murder took place to the artist's house, and no one will. "I'm going to Tatarka." The woman tied the ends of the patterned scarf tighter around her neck. "What is your name?" "Lida." "You see, here's the thing." Kanarin began to kick the zombie back under the trolleybus. "Transportation is difficult right now. Or are you going to take an axe out of your bag and hack your way through the line of zombies down there?" "No, they won't touch me." Having stuck his head out halfway, the zombie nevertheless grabbed Kanarin by the slipper, tore it off, and began to chew it. "Now I'm barefoot because of you," Kanarin yelled. He took Lida by the cold hand and led her down the street. Higher up, closer to the botanical garden, people were crossing the road silently and quickly. Others were running from the botanical garden to the cars lined up along the street, slamming their doors and driving up the hill to go past the botanical garden and down Timiryazovskaya Street to Telichka or the embankment. "I understand," muttered Kanarin, turning into the alley of the Arsenal House, separated from the Palace of Veterans Estate by a wrought iron fence with red posts. "I understand that you probably think the end of the world described in the Apocalypse has arrived. Once upon a time, there were no posts or fences here, but the chestnut trees seemed to always grow along the path, and people would walk calmly there, behind the movie theater, where they would climb a small staircase into a narrow corridor between the fences of private houses. Once past this, it was enough to cross the vacant lot at the foot of the mountain and descend the stairs to the foot of the artist's house, which stands in a hole near the retaining wall of a ravaged slope known as Sobachka. And now, damn, I have to go around it, because there's a wrought iron fence. They turned into a shady, completely quiet courtyard, located in a pit near an almost vertical hillock, where, on a wide ledge, behind the garages and the playground, stood the same Khrushchev-era building as the Arsenal one. Lida walked slowly. Kanarin literally pulled her and chatted. "My last name is Kanarin. It was Kazarin, and now it's Kanarin, like yellow pigment, only with the stress on the second syllable. I'm a local, a long-timer. I live up there. There's a big house, the artist's house. We'll be safe there. From up there, we can spit on the zombies." "It's a dubious amusement," said Lida. "Why are you trudging along like that? You're wearing a long skirt, but not a kimono? A sedentary lifestyle? Running, sports," he said, his spirits rising. They began to climb the path up the grassy hill toward the rusty, bulky garages. An old, gnarled pear tree guarded those garages day and night. Passing between them, Kanarin and Lida emerged into the courtyard in front of a Khrushchev-era building. To the left, further into the courtyard, was another. Kanarin waved his arms. "There's such a topographical mess here that the new postmen get confused. It's not reflected on the maps. This house is addressed as Bastionaya 11A, and the one next door is Bastioni Periulok 11. Can you spot the difference? Both houses have numbers up to 11, but the houses are assigned to different addresses, even though they're adjacent. Is this so important now? Lita asked. If I have to call an ambulance and explain, then it's important. Kanarin almost looked offended. Near the garages, a wooden bench grew out of the ground under a birch tree. Titarenko sat on it, eternally young and eternally drunk. In the heat, he wore a beige raincoat and held a hat with a sweat-stained rim on his lap. Since the 1980s, Titarenko had become a frozen figure, and it seemed he even bought groceries at outrageous prices. He heard the conversation, turned around, and was delighted. Oh, Trump! Yurka, listen seriously. There are living dead on Bastionnaya. Go home. Titarenko spread his hands. Oh, I'm telling you to go home. I'll wait for them. Titarenko smiled cheekily. Maybe we'll kill the goat. He loved to play dominoes and invited almost everyone who passed by. He didn't invite Kanarin. Following Lyuda and Kanarin, a discordant chant began. Those golden years when we drank together at Pechersk are gone. The courtyard was filled with cars, and to the side, between the Khrushchev-era buildings, there were also cars parked. And in that space between the buildings, a concrete wall was visible, supporting a mountain overgrown with cherry trees and lilacs, turning into a botanical garden. But Kanarin led Lita forward, into the neighboring courtyard. Straight ahead, a white cruiser, the artist's house, was visible through the pale walnut trees. Trump, fool! Titarenko yelled from the bench. In the new courtyard, on a bench near the front door, hidden in the apple tree shade of the front garden, two old women were chatting. Parked next to one of them was a small cart, a clear sign of their return from the market on Pechersk. Hide in your homes, Kanarin addressed them. There are people being killed in the streets. Who's killing? One frowned. Living dead. Zombies. This is Titarenko's drinking buddy, the second one told her. I haven't drunk for a long time. All clear. Go, go! What the hell is this? Kanarin spread his arms. I even changed my last name. Go, go! Go on, added another old woman. Let's go, he said, leading Lita further. They began to descend the stairs that led down the slope to a vacant lot between the fragment of the private sector and the vocational school workshops, which lay on an even lower ledge. From that vacant lot, the steps descended to the rear of the artist's house, to Tatarka. It's more convenient to get there from Bastionnaya by metro. Strange. Lita could barely move her legs. Kanarin tugged at her hand, and suddenly a comparison struck his mind. The smell of incense, the cold hand. She wasn't a parishioner. Somewhere far away, probably from the direction of Bald Mountain, an explosion thundered. Chapter 19. Dima and Mila ran to the semicircular exit from the postern. There, in the white sunlight, the suicide was twitching. Either he did it himself or someone helped him. Gravity cannot be overcome. The romantic mood disappeared as if by the wind. Dima cursed like crazy. Clutching the smartphone in his right hand, he tried to grab and lift the man. He was a rather heavy man, or rather, all people are quite heavy. When you try to lift them, they struggle. The hangman dug his fingers into the noose, writhed, wheezing with effort, his tongue lolling out. Mila, help! It's heavy! Dima groaned. Mila tried to reach out, but the man waved his hand and punched her in the nose. Mila pressed her palms to her face, then pulled them away. Blood was streaming from her nose onto her lip and chin. Don't move, Dima shouted at the man. "Straighten your legs!" "Ah!" He realized there would be no movie. "Hold him!" Mila clawed at the bushes and climbed up the rampart. Above the postern arch grew the devil's tree, to which a rope was tied with many knots. "I can't take it anymore," Dima said abruptly from below. Mila felt the knots. There was no way to untie them. She bent over the arch. "Don't you have a knife?" Dima snored and remained silent, and the hanged man breathed heavily and loudly, but seemed to have quieted down and was simply waiting, or had half passed out. "Right now!" Mila reached into her pocket and pulled out a lighter. Crouching down, she scribbled a note and began to move the flame along the rope. The fibers turned yellow and charred, but nothing happened. Then a hole finally burned through and continued to creep, like an invisible being devouring an apple. The remaining threads snapped and the rope was dragged down, where a body fell with a dull thud to the ground. Sniffling and licking blood from her lips, Mila climbed down the rampart, first on her butt, then running, and, throwing her head back, approached Dima and the suicide bomber. Dima handed her a wet wipe. "Are you alive? Here you go." "He broke my nose." "How?" So, a healthy, bearded man lay motionless on the ground, barefoot. His flip-flops had fallen off and lay nearby, with his long hair pulled back into a braid. He could have been mistaken for a biker on a Harley or a priest, but the impression was spoiled by his attire, a plain t-shirt and shorts. His eyes, red from burst blood vessels, blinked and cried at the distant sky. "I wish I could fly away there, spread my arms like wings," he said quietly and began to cough loudly. "He's as sick as those on the liner," Dima said, moving toward the brick wall in front of the arch. Mila also backed away. "You're absolutely right," the man spoke richly, beautifully. "I have a virus, and now I have something else. I've damaged my spine and can't move my leg or arm. And I'm screwed. But so are you. I hope you die." "Dima!" Mila lowered her head for a moment, sniffed the blood, and then raised her nose again. "I hope you die," Dima continued. "If you died, we would just leave and forget. But now what are we supposed to do?" "Let's call an ambulance," Mila said. "What the hell ambulance? There's no connection." "Maybe there already is?" Dima took out his cell phone and looked. The indicator was at 0. "No, it's deaf." "Damn. So what next?" "No, that's unrealistic." "And what?" "To drag him. He probably weighs more than 100. "Your assumption is correct," the suicide responded. "And you shouldn't have moved away from me so quickly. The virus is already on your clothes, your skin, and has most likely already entered your body through your mucous membranes. You are doomed." "That's it. We'll leave him. Let him lie there." "Dima!" "Dima. Dima," he repeated. A whistling roar grew louder from behind the trees. It wasn't surprising. The planes fly low here, the air route to Giuliani. Dima and Mila had often heard it this close when they were on Liska. But now it was incredibly loud, and getting louder. Once in a million. Mila understood. "Let's hide." She pulled Dima into the porch. She ran a few steps inside, beneath the earth, and darted back toward the suicide. But Dima pulled her further, deeper, into the darkness, into the stench of cement, while the bearded men lay at the entrance, yelling at the sky. "Thank you! Not everyone will survive." Chapter 20. Pantyukin thought he was hiding behind a glass of juice, but everyone saw him. Few people had gathered for the literary gathering today. Everyone was afraid of the zombie virus, so everyone read more poems aloud than usual. They unanimously realized they'd be overdoing it, so they decided to play crocodile with a twist. Crocodile is when you use gestures and your face to show, hint at what you're trying to convey. Pete Laren, not a poet, he called himself a poet, stood up, bowed, stuck 2 fingers in his mouth, and pretended to vomit. Jean-Paul Sartre, nausea, Nyuta said cheerfully and energetically. Nyuta. Pantyukin looked the other way over his glass. Then he adjusted his long, black-covered bass guitar, which was leaning against a chair. He was supposed to be heading to the rehearsal space on Rybalsky Island. The Ural, which he had personally rebuilt, would be traveling from one island to another today. To avoid becoming another victim of pantomime, Pantyukin anticipated the events. Even aesthetes go to the toilet. And he left the little room, for the Budgerigar Cafe doesn't have its own toilet. He has to go outside to the paid portable toilet, blue and substantial, a kind of mini bunker. Pantyukin, seeing it, always knew where he would wait out the zombie apocalypse. The Budgerigar is the last bastion of culture among the Handaliki, kebab houses, and various pavilions on the large island of Hydropark. Between the 2 banks of the Kiev River, from the very mouth of the Desna, stretch enormous islands, entire continents. Muromets, downstream and adjacent to it by an isthmus, Trukhanov, and finally, separated from the latter by a strait, Hydropark. Hydropark is connected to the left and right sides of Kiev by bridges. Hydropark boasts a metro station, beaches, floating restaurants, land-based restaurants, cafes, tennis courts, bike shops, and even a church. The Budgerigar Shashlik bar, lit by rays of poetry, dispelled the smoky gloom, and bards and poets flocked there on Saturdays like moths to a light. Today they flocked during the day, because who knows what will happen in the evening? A curfew might be imposed in the evening. Actually, it's simpler. The poetess Avarina was leaving for Kharkiv that evening, and without her, the get-togethers somehow didn't go well. So they gathered during the day. Pantyukin dropped a coin into the slot, opened the toilet, and latched the door behind him. Sunlight filtered through the translucent polymer ceiling. Pantyukin noted the service, a roll of paper. "Well, it's long, 65 meters," he said cheerfully. The side of the toilet was hit hard. "Hey!" Pantyukin shouted, and quickly zipped up his fly. Again. "Hey! What, nothing else to do?" People were running around the street, shouting something incomprehensible. "There it is! There it is! Back!" And the man screamed as if he was being cut. Oh my God! Pantyukin leaned his hands against the wall and listened. Sweat trickled down his forehead from his wet hair. The footsteps and voices were fading, and the space around the toilet seemed to be emptying. How am I going to get out of here? The thought pierced his temples. He pulled his phone out of his pants, turned it on silent, then tried calling his mother. The line was overloaded. His father, same thing. He cursed under his breath, and such silence descended that Pantyukin feared his heartbeat would betray his secret. He stood there for about 10 minutes, trying to access the internet on his mobile. Then he selected Katya Avarina from his phone book. He stared blankly at the display and couldn't believe it when the call timer began flashing. He immediately raised the phone to his ear. "Katya, can you hear me?" "Yes, where are you?" "In the bunker, in the toilet. We're at a cafe. The door is closed. There are bars on the windows." "I'll move in with you." "Wait, I need to ask. Wait. What's next to me? I can see my house from the window. I don't have a view. Let me see, just a second. One more. Right now. There's a body lying right under your bathroom door. And closer to the door, there's another one. Some woman. I can't see very well. You certainly found someone to ask. Are you all there in the cafe? Yes. No one came out except you. I want to come to you. Can you let me in? We'll need to dismantle the door. We've got all this junk piled up underneath it. I'll talk to everyone and call you back. We'll need to clear out the junk, clear the door, and then we'll give you the go-ahead. Is there anyone else around? What happened? The end of the world, with all the ensuing consequences. Got it. But wait, how am I supposed to get out of here? You said there was a body by the door. One of you needs to come out and drag it away. Wait, I'll call you back now. Holding the phone in his hand, Pantyukin stood again, leaning against the wall and silently screaming, his head raised, his mouth open. Everything collapsed in a matter of seconds. There would be no more literary gatherings, no need to go to work. Money had lost all its weight, and now toilet paper, and long 65-meter ones at that, has far more practical value. Electricity would disappear, as would hot and cold running water. Smiles would be wiped from faces forever. Distances would increase. You'd never board a minibus again, but instead you'd have to fight your way through a dead city, an axe in your hand, to the next neighborhood. The poetry of life would leave you, and you'd be filled with the poetry of decay, and poisoned by it. Pantyukin screamed silently, tears streaming down his cheeks. Chapter 21. Ira's cycling suit dried almost immediately, but her sneakers were still waterlogged, and they would surely remain that way until her death, because she wouldn't make it. She wouldn't make it. The steppe gave way to a grove, which then gave way to a field again. Ira decided to stay away from the dirt road she'd emerged onto from the shore, since Igor clearly wouldn't be able to bike off-road. She took off her helmet. She'd even swum with it on, like a fool, and hid it in her backpack. Now it came in handy. She clutched her neck with one hand, pressing burdock to the wound. She'd been looking for a plantain leaf and found burdock. Maybe it heals too, who knows? The blood had at least stopped, having managed to drench her shoulder, and now her cycling suit was sticking to her skin. On a densely grassy but withered from the heat meadow near the bushes, she crouched down so she couldn't be seen, took out her dead mobile phone and pulled out the battery. "To prevent further short-circuiting," she said to the sun. And the sun replied, "Head south." "Following." Ira stood up and trudged on. Then her path was blocked by a canal similar to the one she'd swum across. Between the water and the field were trees and a dirt road worn by bikes. Looking around, no one was there. Ira made her way to the water, took off her cycling jersey, washed the blood off it, and washed the blood from her shoulder. She didn't dare wash the wound, so she put her clothes back on. Scooping water with her palms, she drank. She wanted to go around the canal, or the river, or what was it? The body of water resembled a narrow steppe river, only without a current, but it seemed like such a long way to go. She put her sneakers and socks in her backpack and started swimming to the other side, maybe 20 meters. The heat subsided somehow, but halfway through, Ira felt she had no more strength. She'd fold her arms and sink to the bottom. On the other bank, beyond the bushes, there was another field, and she walked and walked and walked. Grass was all around, even from the water-filled patches. Tufts of grass grew. Another row of trees marked a new channel. Although Ira crossed some trails, she didn't encounter any people. Muromets Island usually served as a pilgrimage site for cyclists on Saturdays. Ira didn't swim across this new canal. There were no wood goblins, and moved along the dirt road alongside it. The trees provided shade, her strength returned a bit, and she could walk almost straight and proud. The grove matured, and the path turned. Ira saw a narrow bridge on concrete T-shaped supports across the canal. The bridge was guarded by old green railings made of iron rods and pipes. The water in the canal reflected the sky and trees, upside down and clear. Fish flopped their tails among the reeds and water lilies. The opposite end of the bridge touched open space, probably steppe again. A red post was driven or dug into the ground there, just like the one at the beginning of the bridge on this side. Probably to keep cars out. Ira approached the railing and spotted 2 bikes lying near the far support, by the acacia bushes on the gentle slope down to the water. No one. Below the bikes are 2 concrete slabs lying around, and a green toad kingdom in the lilies. No swimming here. "Is anyone here?" Ira thought she shouted. "Kua, kua!" How still this water stands, not a murmur. The bright scarlet prow of a kayak slowly emerged from beneath the bridge, unfolding. Ira didn't look down, but simply waited, mesmerized, for the movement to continue. Quietly, centimeter by centimeter, a pod-like boat with 2 seats appeared from above, let's say 2 stories high. An unshaven young man and a young woman, both wearing dark glasses, reclined in the boat, clutching oars with orange blades. The boy began to rise, clumsily slashing his oar to the right. "Violation!" The surface swirled, rippling like waves, the upturned sky distorted, and punishment descended. The kayak capsized, quickly, and died away with a splash. Those on the other side did nothing. Ira slowly ran to the far side of the bridge, intending to get to the shore and maybe drag the kayak ashore, to help somehow. And then, from behind, there was a loud ringing sound, sharp, into her heart. I turned around. Behind me, at the beginning of the track, Igor was sitting on a bike. The one who talked about the Lazarus Project. The one who carried biosubstrates. And ahead, from the red post, on all fours, along the cement surface interspersed with small stones, a man in a wet gray-green cycling suit was crawling, his wet hair covering his face, pulling up one limp leg. Ira continued running across the bridge toward the crawling figure. Dead or alive, it didn't matter. She heard the rustle of tires. Igor was following her. Near the last bridge support, Ira grabbed the railing with her hands and leaped over it with a swing, spinning around. She landed 1/2 meter away, on the protruding edge of the support. Without holding on to anything, Ira sat down on it and dangled her legs over the concrete. Above her was the bridge deck and the railing posts. Igor didn't reach the support level, and pushing off with his foot, made a turn. She could see it. He rolled back to the base of the bridge and held out his pistol. Ira thought he was going to shoot her, but he fired ahead of himself. Again. Only then did he begin to aim at her. Ira turned and, clinging to the edge of the support with her hands, slid down a bit, then let go and flew backwards into the water. A cracking shot. The bullet sheared leaves from an overhanging acacia branch and knocked a chunk out of the concrete. Water. It wasn't the gunshot that stunned Ira. It hit her nose and filled her throat and eyes. Frightened toads leaped from the banks. Ira stumbled through the mud and made it to the bank. A few steps to the bikes. Water poured off her in streams. Spreading her arms out, it turned out to be easier to walk this way now. Ira took these steps, lifted one bike from the ground, and then her thoughts were clouded by warm darkness. Chapter 22. In the dim light filtering in from the ceiling, Pantyukin surveyed his refuge. It certainly wasn't the safest place in the universe right now, but within the confines of Hydropark, it very well might be. Air entered through a plastic ventilation pipe. Pantyukin assumed there was some fresh water in the toilet, so he wouldn't die of thirst if he found a way to reach the container or managed to drink by flushing it. "Don't drink from the toilet. It's full of germs and infection," Pantyukin recalled. He imagined himself drifting through outer space in a portable toilet. The spacecraft had collided with an asteroid. Only the toilet survived. Avarina hasn't called yet. If his guitar were here, Pantyukin would risk forcing his way into the cafe. With a heavy Ural guitar, gripped by the neck, he could take on a horde of zombies, using the bass as a crushing weapon. He carefully tried to loosen the toilet from the inside. After all, if Avarina didn't organize a rescue operation, Pantyukin would have to get out on his own. What if he turned the toilet on its side? Then the body under the door wouldn't block the exit. Pantyukin pressed both hands against the wall perpendicular to the door, then pushed. But the stall remained unshakable. Maybe they'd screwed it in with dowels and cement. He could have shoved her with his shoulder again, but he was afraid. What if there were zombies roaming around? But if help didn't come, he'd have to act. He couldn't just sit here until nightfall. He wiped the sweat from his forehead with his hand. At first, he thought it was hot because he was scared, but the cabin was simply hot. The smell of chemicals was strong, and it was becoming increasingly unbearable, though Pantyukin knew it was just his imagination. Nothing was changing, and he was probably stuck here forever. The cold blue of the walls was oppressive and irritating. "I'll go crazy," Pantyukin said to himself. There's probably a tense social moment at the cafe right now. Opinions are divided. Some poets, bold and decisive, want to remove the barricade from the door and rush to the aid of their fellow writer. Others, timid and backward, are resisting, maybe even threatening them with large knives. If it's a cafe, then they should have knives like those used for cutting cake, with smooth, wavy teeth. Niura, are you with one or the other? This is truly a windowless cabin, except for a door. They could have used tinted glass so you could see in from here, but there's no way to see outside. It's clear no one intended the cabin to be used as a shelter during a zombie apocalypse. But sometimes people end up staying here for a long time. Are they supposed to stare at the blue door all the time? No, they could certainly read something on their smartphones. He took out his phone again and redialed his parents. The line was overloaded. He took a chance on Avarina. No one answered. Then Pantyukin started dialing everyone in the phone book. Overloaded. Overloaded. A vague notion arose that it would be impossible to make a call outside the island, at least not to either bank of Kyiv. Within the hydropark, then, it might be possible. But what about the other islands upstream? Tukhanov, Muromets. Pantyukin reached the Latin letters and pressed his finger on Vitali. He couldn't even remember who Vitali was, or where he knew him from. But damn, if some Vitali responded, Pantyukin would feel a little happier in this tightly sealed outhouse, which, in the worst case, would become his grave. Instead of Vitali, some girl answered. "Hello?" Chapter 23. The saddle of someone else's bicycle was raised above the clouds. Holding on to the frame, Ira pedaled, seeing the footprints of boots and the snaking patterns left by the tires of bicycles sweeping through the dust beneath her. The road ran through a field, between groves of trees growing in patches. Perhaps that's why Muromets was once called Muravets, from the grass that covered it. The terrain was becoming increasingly recognizable. This meant Ira was approaching civilization. There would be people there, living people. The dead remained on the bridge and nearby. Then she blacked out, briefly grasping the essence of things. Their structure and space became one with her. Then came the scuffle on the bridge, the clang of a fallen bicycle, Igor's cry, "He won't shoot anymore! How good! How glad I am!" Pushing her bike by the handlebars across the slippery dark ground, Ira emerged onto the bank and rode out into the steppe without looking back. Crows remained above the bridge, chattering anxiously. They couldn't understand how it could be so cold, yet move. This had never happened before. And now Ira stopped on the road in the field. Her head was clouded with fatigue. Her eyes were closing. She could just ride up to those bushes, put her bike down, hide in the grass herself, and get a 15-minute nap. The cell phone rang. At first, Ira thought it was a hallucination. Her phone was dead. We fall into the water and get bricked. Then she realized the call was coming from the saddlebag. Ira unzipped it and pulled out someone else's smartphone, a large one with a metal case and no case. The screen read, "Pantyukov Bass." She answered the call. "Hello?" There was a hesitation on the other end of the line. "Vitaly, for me!" "I'm not Vitaly." "I understand." Pantyukin thought for a moment, then asked, "And where are you?" "And who are you?" "I'm Pantyukin. It turns out I can only reach people at Hydropark." "I'm in Muromets, and there are zombies here, like this." "Then you'll believe what I tell you. There are zombies at Hydropark too, and I'm stuck in a pay toilet." "And there is no one to save you?" "My friends are at the cafe nearby, but they don't seem to be in a hurry. Are you safe now? What's your name?" "Eeyore." I had to lisp. I had to. "Ira, nice to meet you. I'm Pavlik. Are you hiding somewhere?" "No, I'm standing in the middle of the road." "What do you mean? You said there were zombies on the island." "Well, they're in the northern part. There's an abandoned campsite there. I haven't reached the Moscow Bridge yet. I'm in the wilderness." "Do you think the bridge is safe? That there are no zombies there?" "I don't know yet. I'm already very tired. I'm glad to hear from you, but wait, I'll try calling Mom back, and then I'll come back to you." She hung up and called her mother. "How was it at the little house on Kingrusty?" The line was overloaded. Ira called Pantyukin back. Pantyukin's base. "Hi, it's me again. I can't get through to my mom." "As I understand it, we can't contact either shore. I told you so." "Yes." "So, are you going to the bridge now?" "Yes." "Can you call me back later and tell me what's going on?" "Yes." "And what's around your toilet?" "I don't know. So far, everything's quiet. But there were zombies. And there's a dead man lying at my door, so I can't get out. I'm trapped here." "Well, why don't those friends pull you out?" "I don't know." He paused, then suggested, "Maybe someone in their cafe also turned into a zombie and killed everyone." "Okay, nothing good. I'll go now and call you back soon. I'm really out of sight here." "Yes, move. Good luck." Soon, the road Ira was driving on changed from dirt to gravel. This was encouraging. And here was the place where several of these gravel paths converged on a vacant patch of ground between the aspens and poplars. And then, in 2 rows, slabs ran toward the bridge and the bus stop. There were already lamp posts and trash containers here, and people were expected to appear. But they didn't show up. Ira rode along the slabs, her bike rattling loudly on the joints, and she turned onto a dirt road that ran alongside the slabs. The main alley. Beneath the tall candles of the poplars are benches and trash cans. Where are the pensioners reading? Where are the children? Where are the adults? She was driving on the left, the poplars on the right, the alley on the right, and a corpse in a swimming trunks was crawling across the dirt road ahead. Ira turned and sped across the flagstones. No, wait. It could be a living person, and he needs to be put on the trunk and driven further. To the stop, and a kind bus will arrive, or a trolley bus, a minibus, whatever else is running. Or maybe some passing car will stop. The door will open, and the driver will say affably, "Do you need help? Get in. I'll take you home." There was blood on some of the slabs, and because of the trenches between them, the blood was confined to squares, giving the whole thing the appearance of a strangely elongated checkerboard. Ira drove a fair distance away from the body. The distance to the beginning of the alley and the entrance to the bridge was quite long, but she covered it so fast the wind whistled in her ears. There were people already here, sitting on the grass by the side of the road, some lying down or standing, hugging a tree. All dead. She flew past a bench where a zombie, with his head down, was pecking at a bag of nuts. The boy looked at the ball and did not move. Ira slowed down, riding around him. He saw her off with a forgotten face and tightly clenched jaws. 2 striped barriers, flower beds filled with flowers, almost a cemetery. Further up, toward the bridge, the highway sloped away, and to the left was a turnoff to various pavilions and eateries. There was activity there, and ahead the dead walked along the highway, lazily and spasmodically, aimlessly. Ira sped up the hill between them, as if in a nightmare, past a fence with billboards advertising the park's amenities. Beach, scooters, jet skis, barbecue area, have fun. Beyond the fence was a bike rental spot, but there weren't any. Usually, there were plenty of cars parked from here to the bridge. Now there were only a few, and zombies were milling around one. To the right, in the distance, a support for the cable-stayed Moscow bridge juts into the sky. If you cross it to the right bank, Ira will reach Priorka through the Obolon River, and then her hometown. Above the bridge, invisible from here, several columns of black smoke were rising, and these columns, dissipating, merged in the air into a murky haze. Ira continued driving more slowly. The road, both the highway and the pedestrian sections, was elevated relative to the island. Thick willows, drooping in the heat, grew beneath the hill. Ahead, a turquoise bus stop with a pink roof appeared. A nice combination. And to the left, there was another bridge over the Chertoroi River. And the secret was revealed. There, too, smoke is blackening the skies. An intersection, but not an overpass. The roads merge into one, toward the bus stop, toward the bridge. Guardrails line the sides. Small objects on the bridge's roadway, but miraculously clear straight ahead. There's a descent and an isthmus to Trukhanov Island. Ira stopped, put her feet on the ground, and called Pentukin. For some reason, he didn't answer for a long time. "Yes, hello. Haven't they pulled you out yet?" "No, I'm still the same. One foot in the toilet and the other in the grave." "Then I'm going to save you. There is a strait between Trukhanov and Hydropark. We'll figure it out.